And we're streaming? Okay. Great. Thank you. Rios, we're ready to start.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Historic Districts Review Board. Today we are April the 25th, 2023. Melissa, may we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Chair Rios,
Here.
Vice Chair Guida,
Here.
Member Aguilar Medrano.
Excused.
Thank you, Member Berkeley.
Here.
Member Beachside.
Here.
Member Bienvenue.
Here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Chair Rios, there is one correction. Mr. Satisone will explain what it is for 412 Camino Don Miguel. The overall square footage for the addition is smaller than 251 square feet. And in his presentation, he'll clarify that is, I think it's approximately 109 square feet. So that's a correction to the caption where it's a smaller square footage.
Thank you. Anything else?
No other changes.
Madam Chair, if I may, Heather, I can't access the case for 412 Camino Don Miguel. Is it not uploaded?
It should be uploaded. I can.
Packet? Okay, yeah, so yeah, it's not a,
Member Benvenue just indicated he couldn't access it. You
Let
can,
me look.
interesting. This side can, this side can't. Or you couldn't see it. Oh, well, just one privileged person each.
I'll double check. just
okay, thanks, Heather.
We'll continue. So there are no, with that one change, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Rita moves to approve as amended.
Do I hear a second?
Beachside seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Berkeley,
Yes.
Member Beachside,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue,
Yes.
Member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. We have minutes of April 11th, 2023. Any changes to any of these? Member Benvenue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 4 of the minutes at the very top, the first full paragraph before the period, add the words, "The first exception criterion had not been met." So that the sentence now reads, "He said he offered language consistent with the staff report that said the first exception criterion had not been met." And that's all I have.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve as amended?
Beachside moves to approve the minutes from April 11th, 2023 as amended.
Bienvenue seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Berkeley,
Yes.
Member Beachside,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue,
Yes.
Member Guida.
Abstain.
Thank you. The motion has been approved.
We have 2 findings of fact and conclusions of law. Any changes to either one of these? Member Beach.
On the findings of fact for 1249 Cerro Gordo, I believe we designated the walls and planters as non-contributing. I didn't see that reflected in the write-up. It just refers to the status of the structure only. I don't know if that's something you feel like needs to be added or not.
Chair Rios, Board Member Beachside, that's a really good point, and we can add those and edit that and bring it to you next time, just to be sure.
Thank you.
Anything further? Is there a motion to approve as amended?
Beachside moves to approve the findings of fact and conclusions of law, except for case number 6553, HDRB at 1249 Cerro Gordo, which will be presented at another hearing.
Is there a second?
Bienvenue seconds. And can I just make a comment? This is again, we did not have these circulated to us prior to tonight or the posting of the packet. So I would reiterate the request that these be circulated at least 3 days before the meeting day, before they're posted online.
Thank you. Hopefully that they can comply with that. Roll call vote, please, reference.
Member Berkeley,
Yes.
Member Beachside,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue, Member
Yes.
Guida.
Yes.
Member Guida, thank you. Motion has been approved.
Matters from the public. Is there anyone in this audience or on Zoom that wishes to make any statement about anything? Not about anything, but in reference to what this board reviews. It appears not. Anyone on Zoom?
Yes, Chair Rios, Mrs. Benato. Stephanie, you may unmute.
Thank you, Stephanie Benato, and that's either Doctor or Ms. I just wanted to again bring up the St. John solar installation, solar panels that are obvious apparently from Camino Cruz Blanca. And this was in the paper and I brought it up to you all. I don't think maybe last meeting or the meeting before. And I'm just wondering if anything has happened because I was looking through the code the other day for something else, and I saw that the historic board is supposed to review electrical installations, which I think these solar panels would qualify for. So if there's some follow-up on that, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, we'll move on to staff communications. Anything under staff communications, Heather or Frank?
Yes, Chair. The first thing that I have for the board is a reminder on May 10th, we're going to be making a presentation in front of the City Council regarding the Historic Preservation Awards. And I'll coordinate with you offline as to who's going to be handing out those awards. My idea at the council presentation is it would be those who cannot be present at the presentation on May 18th at the San Miguel Chapel. So it would be members Bienvenue and Aguilar Medrano. So, but I do want to make sure that the board is okay with that. And then the next item would be that the general plan tomorrow is going to, the resolution is going to the city council governing body for review and approval. It's gone through finance committee as well as quality of life committee. The content of this resolution is authorizing staff to issue an RFP for consultants. And so like with the zoning code, with the general plan update, we'll be reaching out to various stakeholders. We've already had some conversations with stakeholder groups to assist us with that project, but that probably won't be going in earnest until after the RF or the project has been issued a contract. And I would imagine that would be the way things go with the city in the fall. It's just lots of boxes to check. So, and then finally, I would also like to let you know at the May 9th hearing, we will be discussing only cases related to the state of New Mexico's requests for status review for 4 bungalows on Don Gaspar, as well as the Pinot Building at 130 South Capitol, the Associated Fleet Building, there at the corner of South Capitol and Galisteo, and there's a garage as well that is associated with the Pinot Building on that site. So we're going to be having a sort of heavy meeting, and we decided that what would be best is for us to reserve that for the state and that dialogue. So that's what's going to be happening on May 9th, and you'll be getting your packet well in advance. So there's also going to be a framework for you as to how we review state projects. As this has been a topic of discussion as of recent, we just want to make sure we're clear on, you know, what is the way forward given whatever decision you might have to make. So,
Anything further?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Attorney Rubelit.
Per a request that you made in conjunction with member Bienvenue, and I regret that you were unable to attend that meeting, but member Bienvenue came to the city attorney's office. And we discussed the issue whether or not when there is a quorum of only 4 members present at an HDRB meeting, whether the 3 members voting and voting 2-1 to adopt and approve a project, whether or not that was sufficient under the rules controlling rules and procedures for city committees, which was first adopted by resolution in 1984 and amended by resolutions in 1990 and 2009. And City Attorney Aaron McSherry participated in that meeting, and we specifically reviewed Article 11 of the Rules and Regulations Controlling Committee Meetings. Article 11, Section 2, subsection C reads, when a quorum is present at any meeting, the vote of the majority of members present shall decide any questions brought before such a meeting, except when extraordinary majorities are required as determined by Robert's Rules of Order. And the city attorney felt that if we could decide this question without looking at Robert's Rules of Order, that it should be decided based solely on the language of this section, which reads only that the vote of a majority of members present shall decide any questions brought before such a meeting. There is no specification that a specific number vote in affirmative or vote negative, or certainly that an extraordinary majority is required, since it does not specifically require an affirmative vote of a majority of members. The result of her analysis was the same as mine, and it is when the chair is present and 3 members are voting, and the chair has to abstain pursuant to Section 2B of Article 11. A vote of 2 of the members does pass the project because it is not specific that a majority must vote in the affirmative in order to adopt a particular project. It just simply reads that a vote of a majority of members present shall decide any questions, and there is a vote of the majority of members present. However, if we go on to look at the language, except when extraordinary majorities are required as determined by Robert's Rules of Order, it is apparent that to require 3 votes to adopt a project would be an extraordinary majority. It would be 3/4 of the members present, and Robert's Rules of Order does not require an extraordinary majority except for items such as a motion to amend the agenda, a motion to limit debate, a motion to amend the rules, and that sort of thing. A motion to pass a resolution or a motion to adopt a bill, it does not require an extraordinary majority. And we drew an analogy to a board meeting where 6 members are present, including the chair who must abstain, and there is a vote of 3-2. Similarly, that would pass the project by 1 vote, because to require 4 members to vote in the affirmative would again require an extraordinary majority, which is not required by Robert's Rules of Order. So Ms. McSherry has been heard on this matter and indicates that both a vote of 3-2 and a vote of 2-1 are valid in order to adopt a project that is before the board. And then on another matter, with respect to Ms. Benedato's question about the solar array that is being installed in the parking lot at St. John's College, I've actually had a couple of questions about that. That is at 1160 Camino de Cruz Blanca. And I am fairly certain what Ms. Benedato is asking about, as well as an inquiry that was presented to be by Mr. Durkovich, who is one of the appellants on the cell tower project that was approved by the board in 2021. The solar array was approved by the Historic District Review Board in a hearing on November 23rd, 2021, which was on an agenda. The agent's name is a gentleman named Eric Johnson, and that HDRB case number was 2021-4456. So if there's some other solar array going in other than that one, then that would be an issue. But the array that is going in there was actually approved by the board upon proper notice back in November 2021. And if Ms. Benedato wants to see the findings of fact and conclusions of law, if she wants to email me her email address, I would be glad to forward these findings and conclusions to her so she can see what the analysis was at that.
Thank you, Frank. Staff, anything further?
Chair, yes, thank you.
And did everyone on the board understand the comments that are being made in reference to the voting. Everybody did? We will move on to old business. There are 4 cases under old business. And I do have to tell you a couple of things. One is if you disagree with the decision this board renders, you do have the option to appeal to the city council. And you can do that up to 15 days after the findings and conclusions have been approved and adopted. The other thing is, if you are a member of the public and you wish to comment on a case, I will limit your comments to 2 minutes, and Melissa will help me with that. Thank you, Melissa. So the first case is located at 502 Cerrillos Road. Are the applicants here? For 502 Cerrillos Road, they are here. This is Heather's case, and we will hear her report.
Thank you, Chair Rios. The subject property is located, oh my goodness, just one moment. I picked up the wrong one. Let's see. Oh, I have to stop sharing and then share again. My apologies. Maybe I should use 2 different computers. Keep myself straight. All right, great. The subject property at 502 Cerrillos Road is located at the intersection, sort of the Y intersection of Cerrillos Road and Sandoval Street. They're on the western side, highlighted with the red circle. As you can see, the building has many different phases of construction, as you can tell by the different roof lines. The building is designated as non-contributing. Our discussion last time when this was brought forward to the board was the need for additional information related to the building's construction, its phases of construction, and for the board to better able, because it's right at the 50-year mark, the need to determine whether it would be eligible for a status review, and then staff would determine whether a status review would be necessary. There has been some correspondence that have been included in your packet, but it did not provide much information other than what was in the HICP already. So it may be that the applicant has additional information. We'll make that part of the presentation. So the street facing view, you can see that the building has been a couple of different businesses. It was the Schifani Brothers for a long time, a printing company, as well as a sound recording record company previously. The north elevation is the elevation that is the one that is going to be most impacted by the changes, other than the east elevation. And the applicant is proposing to add a terrace and outdoor seating on this side of the building. The loading area and that portion that is farthest most west will not be changed. This is the site plan illustrating the site, and West Manhattan Street continues towards the rail yard. And so there will be some parking at the front, including ADA parking, and then there will be additional parking at the rear and then on-street parking for patrons. As noted before, the elevation or the portion of the site that will be impacted the most would be along the northern portion of that site. The applicant is proposing to enclose portal on the east elevation and provide some different associated site treatments for a terrace, outdoor terrace and seating area, which includes the addition of a door. You can see here by the floor plan that there is a distillery that is planned with some equipment located in the rear portion of the building and seating areas, and the new door, which is at the existing window opening, will access that terrace to the north. And then just to understand the context and the rationale for the enclosure of the portal, there will be an office at that front, and the main entrance is going to be moved over to where the existing two windows exist now. This illustrates both the existing and the proposed elevations, east elevations. The applicant has not substantively changed the proposed elevation or the treatments to the elevation, as well as the proposed signage. You can see that the enclosure of the portal that will be faced with a sheet metal material. The existing lintel will be retained. And then I have provided a detail of the sign, the proposed sign that's going to be on the portion of the wall where the Schifani Brothers cutout letters were previously. And you can see the treatments also to where the doors are going to be inserted in place of the windows on that elevation. The north elevation, which is also going to have a lot of renovation to it, you can see that there's window replacement, the insertion of the door, the construction of increasing the height of a yard wall, and the creation of that terrace area for outdoor seating. And then the west elevation will remain unchanged with the exception of the yard wall that I previously mentioned. You will be able to see that. These are the different trims that are being proposed. The applicant provided some pretty substantive information and photographs, reference photographs in the packet regarding the use of metal material in the historic transition district. The historic transition district, though, however, does state clearly that it should be only on accessory or, as details and accents to use of metal. For instance, at the old theater, which is where the Radish and Rye business is now, there are accent materials that include metal, as well as over the food hall, which is Chomp. They do have cantilevered elements, metal elements, but it's not a major part of the wall in either case. And there are some other examples provided for you by the applicants. So staff finds that the additional history has not been sufficiently addressed to determine whether a revised Higbee is needed or whether there would be any potential status or no change in status to retain the non-contributing status. And then, as I stated previously, it's not permitted as predominant material on facades. As you can see on this east elevation, it will occupy a fairly large area of that facade, especially you can see on the picture from the Higbee, with the dark sort of feature of that area is going to be somewhat similar to what one will see, but with just a different material and color, obviously. And the sign design, there were no changes made to that. And so staff defers to the board to determine or make a finding based on what the applicant may present at the hearing, as well as any additional information from the public. That concludes the staff presentation.
Thank you very much, Heather. Heather, this is in the transition district, as we heard. Can you tell us in a nutshell what style of buildings are appropriate in the transition district, as opposed to it's close to, really close to the downtown historic district, East Side Historic District?
So Chair Rios, as we provided the Higbees for that project, for the grant project that did a lot of survey in the historic transition district, so that's it's a mix of things. So there were car dealerships, there was a movie theater, there was also single family detached housing and some industrial types of uses in the historic transition district, like mechanics and so on. So it was a real eclectic mix. This building itself was built in the 1970s, but is similar to what you find in a lot of buildings in the transition district, which is of that Santa Fe style, with the overall, a reinterpretation of Santa Fe style, and then with the overall massing and appearance like it would be in a downtown East Side Historic District building. a traditional adobe building.
Thank you, Heather. Any other questions or comments? Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Heather, for the Historic Transition District, is there a specific period of significance or statement of significance? Or, I mean, is this district part of the National Register nominated districts, or this is just a city designation?
Chair Rios, Member Guida, it is just a city district. It is not part of the National Register District.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Member Benvenue.
Madam Chair, so I'd just like to sort of sort out what's before us at this time, now that this is coming back to us. So one is status review, if I understand it, or at least potential status review. The motion, as you know, specifically included a status review because we were already deferring it for potential redesign and requests for exceptions. And part of the rationale behind the status review, and by the way, it was specifically did not require a HICB to be done because we felt that would be an unnecessary expense. But one of the rationales for the status review request was so that staff would have an opportunity to make a recommendation to the board as to whether or not the non-contributing status should be retained. I think we can potentially dispense with the status review, even though that was the motion, since it hasn't actually formally been noticed as a status review, and it's my understanding. But I would still like to know what staff's recommendation is as to whether or not this should be maintained as a non-contributing structure.
Chair Rios, Member Bienvenue, I would say that due to a large number of changes on especially the street facing facades, that staff is of the opinion that the non-contributing status be retained. I did look at some of the historic aerials, and since it was built in the 70s, there has been really no change in the footprint, but there has been changes in function over time. So there's also changes in window openings, as well as the different styles of windows and doors. And you can see on that underneath the portal, there's been replaced windows and doors that aren't original to the building. So staff is of the opinion that a non-contributing status should be retained. And with that motion, the intent was not to do the HICB, like you said, but just to have that additional information. So to determine whether a status review is necessary. So at this point, based on my opinion as staff, it should be non-contributing, but I don't have that additional information.
Okay. And is that because it was requested of the applicant and not provided?
That is correct.
All right. Two other issues that came up at the last hearing that required us to postpone. One was the fact that there was exposed concrete for one of the patio walls, which is prohibited under the code and would require an exception request. Is that still being requested? I couldn't tell.
Chair Rios, Member Bienvenue, I'd like to defer the applicant to provide additional information.
Okay. And then the other concern related to the enclosure of the portal. And do I understand correctly that there are two issues there? One is the fact that our code prohibits enclosures of portals generally. And then secondly, you also have a concern about the material. So are there really two necessary exception requests involved here? One would be for enclosing at all with any material, and the second would be the use of the steel plates.
Chair Rios, Member Bienvenue, the historic transition districts are vague enough that, it would be a determination as whether this would be considered sort of an accent feature or whether it would actually be considered sort of like a metal wall. So it's in the opinion of staff that, I can look up the transition district standards for you after the applicant has made their presentation and read off the material list and the specific language.
Okay. Well, yes, I think we established last time that metal paneling is specifically prohibited in the historic transition district. So
I'd like to double check.
sure, I appreciate that. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments, board members? There's not. Will the applicant or applicants please come forward and get sworn in?
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Edward Fitzgerald, 121 Jefferson Street, Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Good evening, Mr. Fitzgerald. Please tell us what you want in reference to this project.
Well, can we have somebody who's going to be on Zoom too? Could they show the presentation?
Sure.
It's Kevin.
And they will have to get sworn in.
Hello,
Excuse me.
Kevin, please state your name and address for the record and be sworn in.
Kevin Segura, 2908 Cliff Palace, Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Thank you. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you.
And is there a way for me to share my screen?
I have changed the settings. See if you can do it now.
Okay.
It looks like IT is trying to help me too.
Let's see, join as, okay.
Great. We see your presentation.
Ed, where would you like me to start?
Oh, you could go up to that first, the first slide. Just have to take this with me. To explain, just to go over the materials and everything, so everybody's clear what exactly we're using. The proposed materials are like a naturally rusted steel, and you could see up here where it says 1022, that's where the letters are cut out. So you have a contrasting steel behind that, like a galvanized steel. And then the steel siding shows up pretty good at that middle one of the color that it will become over time.
Can you kindly enlarge that one, please? The middle one? Yes. Thank you.
So it is industrial, and it has to do maybe more with the rail yard than with downtown. But our thinking was it was appropriate for the distillery being kind of an industrial kind of function. And if you look at a lot of old distilleries, a lot of them have this kind of industrial appearance to them. And then we are showing some other examples of the use of steel along Cerrillos, Ojores Cafe there, Radish and Rye. There's different elements along there when you come in. I think that the old Club Luna, I don't know what it is now, that's Radish and Rye. And then the signage and things like that. So we felt like there was some precedence and there was some, that material being used in that area. And Kevin, if we could go to the elevation. So in putting the entrance in the center, the reason we did that was because we felt like that would be a much more of a central entrance to, and it worked with the floor plan on the inside, whereas the portal was crowded on that corner with the parking and the cars coming in. And it also had low, like 7'6" ceilings in there. And so we wanted to go into a portion of the building where we could get more height and also have a recessed entry. And so this entrance actually goes back about 7 feet, so it's covered, so it's recessed. And then the client wanted to put an office in, and we really couldn't find any place for the office, and that's why we enclosed that portal there. And as far as the height is being limited to 14 feet, 3 inches, which we were told was the maximum we could go there. We wanted to go a little bit higher, but they said that that was the maximum. And we felt by enclosing this, the steel, and having a contrast, the stucco, it would bring more attention to this, and it would give it, I would like to say, more of an artistic, feel to it that would give it some unique personality. So that was what drove this design here. And then this was the owner's logo. So that's what we have that there. And that's illuminated from within. As far as this steel goes over there, we felt that that would weather and be patinaed, over time to where it would kind of like look nice with the stucco. So we didn't think it was going to be a harsh material. And when you look at the size of the building, 7'6" height by about 12 feet length is a pretty small portion of the building. Could you show the next slide? This
Which,
more detail of the signage and everything. Do we have an elevation of the side?
yes, I can pull that up. One moment.
Well, you saw in the other drawings that were presented before, the side of the building, which goes along the this side, the north elevation there, and it's quite long. And so really, when you look at this building from the corner of Manhattan and Cerritos, the metal really is going to be a small amount of the whole building. So it's not like we are cladding the whole building in metal. So I would make the argument that it is more of an accent and to bring some contrast and interest to the entry. As far as the other elements, I think that, well, those are the, as far as the exposed cast in place concrete wall, we will stucco that. So that'll match the size. So any questions?
Would you tell us again the dimensions of the steel plate?
Yes, it's about,
I think it's on the other one. Let's see here.
it's 7'6" high by approximately 12 to 14 feet long. And then the entrance is about the same width. It's about 12 feet wide by 14'3". The inside of the entrance is stucco. So it's just going to be the outside enclosure.
Thank you. Board members, other questions or comments? Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just question about the entry. If we could zoom in on the entry facade around the distillery. I'm confused. I think you said that the doorway or the entrance to the building is recessed.
Yeah,
But I'm seeing a canopy that's projecting from the facade also.
right.
Are you proposing both the canopy that's
That's correct. So you
coming from wires and then
you could see here,
a recess into the,
this is the canopy would come out over this portion, and then this is the recessed.
how far does that cantilever out?
cantilever, I think it's like 3 feet that this. It's about 3'6".
And it matches the construction of the shade structure on the patio, more or less.
Yes.
Okay. That's all.
Any other questions, comments? I will ask for public comment at this time. Anyone wishes to speak, come forward and you can speak for 2 minutes.
I'll swear you in. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is John Eddy. My address is number 14 Avenida Campo Verde, Santa Fe 87506. Madam Chair, board members, thank you. I think the thing to keep in mind here is that this is major entry into Santa Fe. And the streetscape here has already been impacted by steel in a very inappropriate way in the form of Starbucks that came down a couple of years ago. They're gone now. So I very strongly oppose the use of steel sheeting this way in this architecture. You can go ahead and discuss that, but I think it's very inappropriate in this neighborhood, be it a transitional neighborhood. The other thing I want you to be careful about is the backlighting of the logo sign. We have encountered problems before, such as at Water Street, where with LED lighting these days, backlighting a sign that way can be very distracting to traffic and to the pedestrians because it can be very, very strong. So I look forward to your discussion on this. Thank you.
Very much. Anyone else? Anyone else on Zoom?
Yes, Chair Rios, Stephanie Beninatto, and then Adam Johnson. Stephanie, you can unmute.
And she needs to join in.
Uh-huh.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Stephanie Beninatto, PO Box 1601, Santa Fe, New Mexico 87504. I echo John Eddy's comments about the backlighting on the logo and also about the steel. It is not just an accent, it becomes quite the dominant feature on that facade. So even though it may not make up a lot of the building, given the length of the north side, it is still, it predominates on this facade. And some of the other places that have metal, like Luna District. I mean, again, it's like overhangs, it's a sign, it's not a whole wall. And so, again, I would ask the board to think about that. I also think that if you haven't gotten additional information, that maybe you don't know whether it's contributing or not, and it's sort of ignoring that fact and just hoping you'll, well, I don't know, not notice. I don't know. But I think that if you talk about especially commercial type buildings, they do transition over time as their use changes. So like if you had a garage, a repair place, and now it's not, you might leave the opening and some hints of it, but it may not still be the garage door. And we're always talking about making buildings livable. And so I suppose in terms of a business, it's, that they can do business. I also would oppose the enclosure of the portal if it's not allowed, and we just had a whole case on that. And I wonder why the windows on the north side are not divided lights, because they are obviously visible from the street. Thank you.
Very much. And Mr. Johnson?
Mr. Johnson, you may unmute. Please be sworn.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Mr. Johnson?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes. Do you
Okay.
swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Adam Johnson, PO Box 1055 87504. Thank you. I think this is a great reuse of this building personally, and sort of harmonizes in part with what is happening across the street. I agree with Mr. Eddy's comments about steel. I personally don't mind a little bit of detailing, but the steel sign itself may be a little jarring in that district. And but I do think that in addition to that, I would also say that the backlit sign could perhaps be spotlit instead. And I'd also like to echo Ms. Benenato's comment about the divided light windows, which I had a question about. So maybe the board can clarify that with the applicant. But I do want to encourage the applicant. I think that this project is really great for this site. And I do think that some steel detailing is appropriate in the transition district, given its proximity to the rail yard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
No, Chair Rios.
Mr. Fitzgerald, I wanted to ask you, can you talk to us about the backlighting on that sign?
On the
On the sign that's
round barrel cactus.
distillery?
The distillery, that doesn't have any light on it.
That what has the backlighting?
Just the barrel cactus. Barrel cactus will be illuminated from within. So you'll read the letters.
Oh, okay. And what are the dimensions of that one?
What are the dimensions?
Yeah,
of it?
what's
It's 4 foot. It's a
Diameter.
diameter of 4 feet.
thank you.
So very, very small amount of that will be illuminated, just the letters.
Thank you. And Heather, the word distillery, is that this district, is that appropriate sizing of the lettering?
Chair Rios, that is permitted in the historic transition district, as well as does comply with the historic district signage standards as well, in section 8.10.
Member Greta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I agree that this project as proposed would be a nice addition to the district. We have less stringent standards in this district. As Heather pointed out, the qualities of this district really are about, like, it's a commercial district that evolved over time in Santa Fe. It's not specific to certain architectural styles. It's not specific to a historic event or time period. So there's a kind of loose description of this district. And as we know, and what's admirable in the applicant's presentation is other examples in the district that use materials to a similar effect and are part of our everyday life in Santa Fe. And in my view, steel, this material is complementary to our local architecture anyway, and as it is used in this district and as it is proposed in this project, to me, I think it would be really quite nice. I think what I'm struggling with is, whether or not we can rule on this application as submitted tonight. And I'm very cautious here that about throwing up roadblocks certainly I thought it was unnecessary to do a kind of in-depth HICPE on a building that just happens to be 50 years old and is otherwise unremarkable. I don't want to hold up applicants in that regard. It's pretty obvious, and I think the board sees that the issue of the status is really a non-issue in this case. But we do have district standards for better or worse. And they apply to more than simply the enclosure of the portal. I'm a big advocate of granting exceptions where they're merited. Big advocate of this board considering evidence from applicants and reviewing designs that may be prohibited and doing so in a way that is within the code where we have exceptions and so forth. I'm challenged here because there aren't applicant responses to the exceptions being sought for enclosure of the portal. They're simply not given by the applicant. Staff has put in a few remarks. The other thing is that these are, again, for better or worse, materials that are, and details that are prohibited in this district. So the steel and the cantilevered entry awning are both things, in my view, that would require exceptions. So again, I'm hesitant to throw up additional roadblocks. I'm sorry that the district standards are as they are. I don't necessarily agree with them, but we do have a process for this. And, tonight we're basically looking at the same application and packet that we looked at last time. And I don't see where we've kind of improved the application or properly noticed it. And so I'm challenged by being able to make a decision on those grounds tonight, not on the merit of the design or its appropriateness for the district.
Thank you, Member Guida. Any other comments or questions? Member Beachside.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for those comments. That is a good way to put the situation that we're in. But I have a specific question for staff about the metal siding with the distillery at the top. I'm unsure how to look at that in terms of the code because it appears to be a sign. And I'm just thinking, I hope this business does well, but if it should leave, we're left with a building with a very permanent sort of identity. And I wonder if you have any advice on how we should be looking at that decision.
Rios, Member Beachside. So that was one of the concerns, and maybe I didn't point out well enough in my presentation because I did focus on the portal piece. But those exterior wall materials, the code states that it is intended that all exterior wall materials express a monolithic and massive appearance. Stucco, brick, slump block, and stone are allowed. Materials such as aluminum siding, metal panels, mirror glass, and unstuccoed masonry units or cement are not allowed. And so the applicant has, in part, with the enclosure of the seating area, addressed that. But what remains unaddressed is the issue. And Member Guida is right in that we require an exception. On the other hand, with reference to the cantilevered elements there, I was looking at the district standards and there was nothing other than it is intended that buildings be designed to be wall dominated. Wall dominated means that the building's geometry is more defined by walls than by roofs. So it's up to the board most certainly, but the cantilevered element does not, in the opinion of staff, take away from that wall dominated nature. So both of those elements, and just as a reminder, if there is an exception granted for these metal panels, then that would have to be reviewed by the city council as the text amendment has not yet completed.
Member Benvenu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So yeah, I share the other members' frustration about the presentation. You really haven't even attempted to meet the exception criteria. You didn't respond to several of them. So I think it's clear that the standard, which is the applicant must conclusively demonstrate that every exception criteria has been satisfied.
You're saying that it's a hardship.
No, there are 3 exception criteria, and from the staff report, the applicant did not even respond to the first one. And the second one just said it would prevent a hardship without an explanation. And the third one was that some other enclosures have been permitted, but didn't specifically address anything.
Well, yeah, I didn't think that we could make the argument that it was a hardship.
Well, there you go.
Wait, this is. May I direct the attention to the screen for a moment? This is an updated letter for the signage where we did address the exception criteria here. The first being that we felt that it matched the architectural style as we've been discussing of the surrounding transition district non-contributing buildings. For the hardship, we did consider the fact that by moving the front entrance to the center of the building in order to avoid any interactions with the public and incoming traffic from this side of the parking lot, the current entrance is quite close. So that was a factor in moving the main entrance over. And with that decision, there was no real space for the owners of the business to have an office from. So we wanted to create a secure location with no windows that they could privately conduct business from. And the third option is something that we've been discussing as well, is we just wanted to complement both the rail yard district and continue to have stucco within the entrance, and for the main north side of the building being stucco to maintain the historic look of the building. And with the metal sheet for the signage, we felt that that would be easily replaced for any future residents of the building. Sorry, one more point for the sign. The reason that we wanted it to stand out a bit with the center of the building is this is located at an intersection where you have Sandoval Street, Cerritos, and Manhattan all kind of combining at the same location. So in the interest of the business owners, we wanted a statement that clearly showed what the business was for traffic passing by without being distracted and needing to look very closely at what the sign was. It could be easily read from the road and not cause any distractions for a complicated intersection. So I just wanted to add that point as well.
Thank you for that. Heather, a quick question. Oh, did you have a comment?
Chair Rios, member Bienvenue, with reference to the submittal. There was a specific deadline in order to be able to get things processed and into the packet. So the submittal that I have is April 17th. And so from what I gleaned out of that, that's how I responded to the applicant. So we did not have this, what Mr. Zagora showed to you on time to put into the packet.
Thank you. On the divided lights, is there any requirement for divided lights in this district for this north wall?
Chair Rios, member Bienvenue, no.
Thank you. Otherwise, other than the portal, I would be prepared to approve the application, and I would make a motion if there's no further discussion.
Have the floor, sir.
Thank you. In case number 2023-006360 HDRB 502 Cerritos Road, I'd move that findings be entered that based on the record to date, the non-contributing status of the building should be retained subject to further future review upon receipt of additional information. I would find also that the 3 exception criteria have not been conclusively demonstrated by the applicant to have been met. Specifically, they have not conclusively demonstrated that the exceptions do not damage the character of the district, are required to prevent a hardship to the applicant or an injury to the public welfare, or that they strengthen the unique heterogeneous character of the city by providing a full range of design options to ensure that residents can continue to reside within the historic districts. I would otherwise move that the application be approved as submitted without the sheet metal on the portal or the enclosure of the portal, and with the cement wall being stuccoed as indicated by the applicant.
Is there a second to this motion? Is anyone prepared to second? If not, if there is no second, the motion dies. I will hear another motion. Other board members, 3 that are left? 3 of you.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion.
Member, Booth,
In case 2023-006-360 HDRB 502 Cerritos Road, I move that the application be postponed to a future date. And that the application fully address the exception criteria for the enclosure of the portal and the use of the steel material. Heather, I looked at the code section. It's maybe it's another flaw in our code, but the cantilever section seems buried under the solar equipment discussion in the historic transition districts, although it doesn't seem to apply to that. If staff determines that an exception is also required for the cantilevered balcony or awning, I would suggest that that also be in the packet and properly noticed with exception criteria
are you indicating for a date certain,
for a date certain.
which will be provided by staff. Is there a second to
This
this
is
motion?
May 23rd.
Berkeley seconds.
And what is the date certain?
Sorry for interrupting. It's May 23rd.
May 23rd. Roll call vote, please.
We need a second, Madam Chair. Oh, sorry, we did. Apologize.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear who seconded.
Member,
Member
Member
Berkeley.
Berkeley, thank you. Member Berkeley,
Yes.
member Beachside,
Yes.
member Bienvenue,
No.
member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
thank you, sir. We will see you again. And
So I guess that I'm
keep in
wondering
touch
what
with
you want to
staff.
see the next time.
Keep in touch with staff and you will be here give us the date again.
The 23rd of May, in order for staff to be able to produce the reports.
So I have a question. If the metal panels were approved, then it has to go in front of the city council for approval. So is that another month of? So if the applicant was to come back without the metal, requesting the portal to be infilled, maybe covered with a different material like wood or something that was acceptable in there.
You'd still need to meet an exception request. So the exception requests are for 3 things: the portal infill, the steel panels, and potentially the cantilever over the entry.
When will I know about the cantilever?
Heather will
Okay.
work.
What I
with
would
you.
suggest is that you talk to staff in detail about what you need to
Okay.
do.
Because I'd like to come back and be, final presentation if possible.
Right. And she will guide you
Okay,
and you will have that conversation with her and meet the requirements and then come back.
thank you, Madam Chair.
I'll
Thank
get
you.
in touch with you to set an appointment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the next case. This is Paul's case and it's located at 1120 East Alameda.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Committee members, my name is Paul Duran. In case 2023006569, address 1120 East Alameda Street. The structure is under status review. Is a single-family, single-story residence and currently has no historic status. It is located in the downtown and east side historic district. The main house is approximately 1,470 square feet, which includes a bedroom, a bathroom, and other open spaces. The house is made of adobe brick and is rectangular in shape with a corrugated steel roof. The house also has a cellar which is accessed from the interior. The house and cellar are finished in cementitious stucco and displays mixtures of fenestration and window styles. The house was initially constructed in the early to mid 1930s as identified on aerial maps as an agricultural structure. It has been noted by previous homeowners that there were no utilities installed in the structure until the 1950s. The house was owned by several renowned artists in the Southwest. The house underwent several remodels throughout time with the installation of utilities, a cellar unknown when it was built, and roof repair. A high wall separates the residence from the park on the north, east, and west elevations, and a coyote fence on the south elevation. Material of the wall is unknown, however, is covered by cementitious stucco. The structure does have a unique history to the downtown and east side historic district. The structure is constructed of adobe and maintains historic attributes, including the windows. It shows the evolution from an agricultural structure to a residential house between the 1930s and 1950s. It was a key residence for famed artisans of the Southwest and holds the title of the Marie DeVille House. While the building is over 50 years old, it is difficult to determine the historic areas, the chronology of additions to the house. There are several different roofs on the building, which indicates evolution of the building over time. Staff concurs with the recommendation on the historic cultural properties inventory form conducted by the architectural historian John Murphy, as designated as non-contributing. Any construction of this structure must be reviewed and approved by the mayordomo of the Acequia Madre to ensure that the acequia will not be negatively impacted. And staff has notified Phil Beauvais of this application, and he has reviewed the proposal and determined that there will be no impact. Here's the site plan of the home. Here's the floor plan of the home. Here are the elevations of the home. And here's a 1914 historic map of the area of what we know as present-day Monsignor Park. There's no structure, but we know it's an agricultural field. Oh. My apologies. So we do know between 1914 to 1936, the structure was constructed. It was used agriculturally, as noted through the historical cultural properties inventory form. In 1948, aerial photographs showing the structure is still used. It's there and it participates with the agricultural in the community. In 1958, we know that there was utilities installed. There were sewer, water, and electric. So then it changed from a agricultural structural to now a residence. A 1973 photo showing that it was occupied and maintained. Here's the north elevation, partial north elevation, partial northeast elevation, partial east elevation, partial east elevation, partial south elevation, partial south elevation, west elevation, partial northwest elevation, and the existing fence and gate. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Paul, has the footprint of the existing house been intact for at least 50 years?
Madam Chair, I believe so. Yes,
And have the window openings of this home changed?
it is unknown.
And can you comment in reference to the existing windows?
The existing windows look older than 50 years.
Thank you. Other questions, Member Guida?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Paul, thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to clarify one or two things. It says in here that there's a proposal to do an addition to relocate an exterior wall. We're not looking at that tonight. We're just doing a status review. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, Member Guida, that's correct. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
thank you. And then as far as the status of the building, I appreciate the timeline. I think one of the things that I look for on this board is not in status review cases is not age or that something has necessarily been unchanged. Those are considerations in the overall big picture. But we have a historic district here that has a certain set of features that set out its purpose. In the case of the Downtown and East Side Historic District, we also have a National Register nomination, which does detail period of significance and statement of significance. Those are things that the architectural historians look at in making recommendations of whether a building contributes to the district, regardless of age. And so, I would just direct, the conversation and some of these considerations, if we were to consider, and I don't think we are considering a status change, that they be addressed to that issue and not simply some windows that happen to be old. Not that that's not important, but that's not the key feature that we're looking for in terms of a building's contributing status to the district, if that makes sense.
Member Guida, yes. Thank you.
Thanks.
Member Berkeley?
I did have a question to staff about your concurrence with architectural preservation recommendation, which is you were talking about the age of the house and you're talking about the style of the house, but what about the history of the house and its location in that area, one remaining left representing that agricultural history of Santa Fe? And did that factor into your decision at all?
Madam Chair Rios, Member Berkeley, I think this structure has a really unique history to Santa Fe and to the downtown and historic East Side. However, we are looking at the ordinance and we're looking at the old Santa Fe style and what's significant to the downtown and the East Side Historic District. So I'm deferring to the architectural historian, John Murphy, as he's the professional in this trade. I'm not. I'm learning to be, and I'm working at that. So in sharing that, this structure and this property is unique. However, looking at the chronology of this structure and the agricultural structure, and then turning into a home, a residence, and what it is today, we just don't know its first footprint. It wasn't documented correctly. It wasn't documented, and it's unknown. And I think the unknown pulls us to the non-contributing, because we don't know.
Member Benvenue?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, I'll just start by saying I disagree with that line of reasoning, and especially the final conclusion. I think the fact that we don't know exactly when some of these changes may have been made is why we need to err on the side of caution in this particular case, because it's much more, you would agree, wouldn't you, that it's much more likely than not that the current footprint, as you just indicated, is at least 50 years old. So if whatever changes were made in a period of time, in an historic period of time, right? And Do you agree with that?
Madam Chair, Member Bienvenue, yes, sir.
I thought so. And so really the issue, I think the architectural historian's report is quite interesting, very informative, but his conclusion doesn't really strike me as being a judgment that we would necessarily adopt, because essentially what he says is the architecture seems primitive and does not adhere to a recognized Santa Fe style. Well, the first part is true, but that is potentially what is the very reason it's contributing to that particular historic district, which is an agricultural district on the east side of Santa Fe, along the river and along the Acequia Madre. Naturally, it's primitive. That's what all historic structures were in that area. It does actually adhere to a recognized Santa Fe style. It's vernacular. That is a very important Santa Fe style. It's not specifically the old Santa Fe style or the new Santa Fe style, perhaps as defined in the ordinance, but that's really referencing new construction. Those are style guidelines for new construction. That's not an attempt to index every possible historic style that already exists in Santa Fe. And we certainly don't want nothing but recent and old Santa Fe styles in the district when we have an extremely important style, which is vernacular, especially on that side of town. Maybe less so to some extent in the Acequia Madre Garcia Street area, but definitely once you get into the further area that's farmland. And I think this is an important example of that. It was clearly an agricultural building. It's been converted to a home. It seems relatively, if not incredibly intact. Even the fact that it's had additions is very consistent with the vernacular style. That's exactly how every house on that side of Santa Fe evolved. So I would just disagree with his conclusion and say that, in my opinion, this absolutely satisfies the standard of a contributing structure, which is that it contributes to the historic. Let's see if I can find it. It helps to establish and maintain the character of that historic district. I think this building clearly does. My only real questions, though, are about the walls. What do we know about the walls? There's an indication in the report that the wall, just referred to generically, even though there are multiple walls, was a recent addition, but it wasn't clear to me what that judgment was based on. And the fact that there is a gate in the wall that's facing west would imply to me that that's an historic wall. But what's your opinion on that?
Madam Chair, Member Bienvenue, in reading the Hickby, states that that first wall was established in the 1960s. And looking at that wall looks like it's adobe and it's stuccoed over. And you look at the cottonwood tree and how it's formed around the cottonwood tree, looks like it's recent because just the way it's formed around the tree. So if it was formed in the 60s, that cottonwood tree would have been a lot smaller. And so the wall looks like it was established relatively recently, how it wraps around, but it's unknown. It just appears to be adobe. And then the coyote fence on the side, that's relatively recent. So as of right now, it's unknown.
Okay. Just specifically wondering about the wall on the west side, because that wall has a large gate that's been now blocked off. And that implies to me that perhaps if this was an agricultural structure originally, that was a gate that entered that, or even if once it was converted to a residence, perhaps that was the gate. Because otherwise, I'm not sure if it was a recent wall that was put in, why anyone would put a gate there.
Madam,
and I'm talking about a driveway size gate, not a pedestrian gate.
Madame Rios, Member Bienvenue, in the historic photos, it doesn't show a gate until 1973, and it doesn't show what we saw out there today. However, that wooden gate appears, it looks older than what it probably is, how they constructed it. But it doesn't show that there was a parking designation there, because the parking is where it's always been, where it's at presently. And it's hard to say, it's an unknown, another unknown,
Right.
that wall.
And do we know about the rock wall on the southern side that's on the opposite, across the Acequia Madre, as to whether or not that's on this property?
Member Bienvenu, no, sir.
It's not, or we don't know.
It's unknown, but it's not on the, it's not on their plat that wall is there, as part of their, plat, but that wall is significant. And,
Okay,
but I can look into that. Thank you.
appreciate your responses. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other comments or questions? I just want to say that I strongly agree with Member Benvenue's comments. I think that vernacular architecture is an architecture that got started here a long time ago by our native brothers and sisters and the Hispanic people that lived here. They did not have architects. They did it on their own. And this is the type of architecture that needs to be honored. And I do feel that, strongly feel that this architecture needs to be preserved. And you honor it by preserving it. And also the fact that, I mean, some of this, this building was originally constructed, it's over 100 years old. So for this board who, which is supposed to preserve old buildings, they need to look at this particular application very closely. Thank you. Anyone from the public wishing to comment? John Eddy's coming forward. He has already been sworn in.
Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, were you going to have the applicant give his presentation first?
Oh, I am so sorry. I guess applicant, please come forward.
Truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Aye.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Eric, we do want to hear from you.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. Board and Chair, I want to thank you for allowing us to present the historic status review for 1120 East Alameda. The owners are also here, and it's Sam Gerberding and Amanda Crocker. And Amanda's family has actually owned the house since the 70s. It is estimated that the initial structure was built well before 1959 and that it served as an agricultural use with the fields. I'm pretty sure the wall doesn't date back to then, because an agricultural building wouldn't be very useful if it was surrounded by a wall. So I feel that the agricultural building was probably a freestanding rectangular adobe building. And I believe that the footprint of the original house, if you look at the floor plan that's in your packet, would basically be the master bedroom, the living and the dining would be the original footprint of the agricultural building. And I'm anticipating that it was a flat roofed adobe building, because when you look at the roof structure, you can see that it appears to have been added. The 2x material that was dimensioned lumber wouldn't have been put in 1990 and 1919 or 1920 in an agricultural building. That was one thing I wanted to point out. But I'd also like to point out that this house has evolved from the agricultural use to a residential use. And it is presently a 2-bedroom, 1-bath residence. And what was probably a flat roofed single adobe square, which was the original structure, probably was capped maybe in the late 60s or early 70s with this metal roof on top of it. And also, it appears that at different times over the last 60 years, which would be from the 50s to now, that there was a couple additions done to this house This is what I'm conjecturing. One was the kitchen that was added that was adobe. But there is frame in this house, and that's the rear additions. The bedroom, which isn't characteristic of any 1950s or 60s style. It's a corner of glass that looks like it was built in 70s or something as a greenhouse type space on the back of the house, even though it's not facing south. It's partially, and then the areas that are the reading room, the closet, and the bathroom, most of that is built out of frame and not adobe. So this isn't an adobe house, it's a partial adobe house is what we're looking at. I also think that that bathroom, reading room, and closet may have been a portal that was enclosed, which would be illegal now, right? So it's an illegal enclosure of the portal that was done at a long time ago. I've argued about portals in front of you before and enclosing them. And I just want to point out that John Gaw-Meem enclosed portals all over town. And we've had this discussion before. And like Spanish Colonial Art Museum, the portal was enclosed in glass by John Gaw-Meem. And it was used that way. It was used seasonally. The glass would go in the colder months, the glass would come out in the summer months. So it does have a precedent in this town of enclosing portals. And it's something that's been done quite a bit before. And I've done it on numerous buildings in town also. So the house has evolved. I believe the low sloped shed roof with the 2x cut lumber is more recent. I would say it probably is 50 years old because now 50 years old encompasses the 70s and you know, up to 73. So, you know, the marker's moving. I think I agree with Chairwoman Rios that it has a vernacular, but I think you could say that about any building in Santa Fe that was built early and added on to is vernacular style. But it isn't a Santa Fe style that's recognized in the code. First of all, sloped roofs aren't allowed in that district. They aren't allowed right now. You couldn't put a sloped roof in that district unless you could prove that the majority of the structures in that neighborhood has a sloped roof. You also typically aren't fond of metal roofs because they have reflective value, and you typically don't approve sloped metal roof homes in the historic district unless they can prove that the neighborhood allows for it by the historic use of previous sloped roofed homes. I also think that the principal facade, which is the northwest facade, is actually screened by the high wall, and none of this is publicly visible except a portion of that north wall by the kitchen. And that's the part that's only publicly visible. The rest of it isn't publicly visible. And so the house actually, you can't see but one window from the street of this house. There's a couple things about these elevations that I wanted to mention. First of all, the kind of principal facade that faces the old isn't visible publicly. Second is that on the south elevation, there's two contemporary, basically contemporary additions to what was a traditional adobe home, which is the glass box and also the it looks like the partial portal enclosure that was done on the lower section of the roof where the reading room, the bathroom, and the closet is. It looks like that was enclosed. And I can tell you, if you're inside the house, those were exterior windows that face into those rooms that were turned into doors to access those rooms. So I know that that's not part of the original footprint because it was built on and added at the end of the house. I'd also like to point out the different kinds of windows that are on this house. I think you could see that there were sliders, there's single hung, there's casement, and there's fixed windows. And in some cases, and I think it's particularly on the west section, if you look at, I think it's page 24 in your packet of the HCPI. you'll see that normally these windows are turned so that the divisions are vertical, not horizontal. And this window's turned. I think a lot of these windows were repurposed windows that were used in different styles, sliders, single hung, casement. And a lot of that's the age, the vernacular. They put windows in that they had in different spots and used them in different ways. I actually think some of the windows on the back facade were moved from an original structure that was there and just put out in that wall. So I was trying to determine the history too. And as we all could say, you know, unless you were there and unless we had permits that outline the work that was done, which in this case, we have no permits, I think that were previously done on this house. It's hard to tell exactly what was there, but I think a lot of the windows aren't necessarily in their original position or location. And a lot of them were reused from other parts of the building. There's even, if you look at the aerial, 1973, I believe, which is page 16 in your packet. It looks like there was already a structure that was in that corner that was torn down after 73. Do you see the possible structure note in that corner by the kitchen? It looks like it could have been a small carport or something that existed there. There's the photo from 73, and you can see the arrow that points to that little building that appears to be on the outside of the existing structure that doesn't exist now. So I just wanted to point out some of the irregularities. The other thing is, if you look at page 18 on the front door, he's identifying this as appears to be a repurposed office door from possibly the 20s or 30s, not necessarily a door you'd have on an agricultural building, but a door you may have found and said that would look nice on the front of the house. I believe that's page 18 in your packet. I also feel that the fenestration on the west elevation is pretty much irregular and doesn't appear to be thought about. And you really only have one window on that elevation and it's fixed. And it's a 9-piece window that was fixed. And it also has a little bump out under a separate roof, which I'm not sure exactly what that purpose was, but it may have been just to increase the size of the bathroom they put in that tiny little bit when they added on the end of the original structure. Its architecture really doesn't adhere to what are the defined styles in the historic code. Vernacular isn't a defined style. It's a definition of a building that's changed over time and changed by numerous owners, which is what has happened to the structure. It has more contemporary roof lines. The roof structure is a contemporary roof structure. It's not the old Vigas inside. None of that stuff exists anymore because the roof was torn off the original agricultural structure and raised, I believe, when it was turned into a residence. And so it does have years of changes. And these changes have led to it having no specific style. Certainly you wouldn't approve the addition on the back of the sunroom, the glass corner, because you need to have solid corners in this district. Certainly the windows and doors match the evolution and the changes that happened with the building, but with so many types of windows, casement, single hung, sliders, fixed. I think they were buying them from the yard and putting them in there. I wouldn't be surprised. None of the window profiles are the same either. Were you able to go on site today? I haven't ever really had that request, and I'm sorry that we missed the previous meeting because you couldn't get into the courtyard. But my understanding is that your jurisdiction is public visibility. I know that your also jurisdiction is to look at an existing house and determine if you feel it's contributing or not. But can it be contributing if it's not visible? And the answer is probably yes.
And Heather, did you want
I
to?
just thought I'd throw that out because I was thinking about that the other day.
Heather, did you want to comment in the middle of that? of his?
Yes, with reference to walls can be removed. We're considering the structure of the house. And in considering that house, the structure of the house, not just the wall, that is something that needs to be reviewed by the board.
Yeah, I'd never actually had a request from the board to enter someone's property like that and then be denied presenting because they couldn't go through a gate into a property before. I just wondered if that, I think as the applicant, what would have been the best thing to do is for the board to say, we've looked at the pictures of this prior to our trip. And I don't know if you have the packet prior to your trip. I think you do. That shows that there's a wall around it. And to let the applicant know that you need access, because what happened with us is we got a call that you were there on the property and said there were dogs and you couldn't get in and someone had to come down right now, but you had no time to wait. And so you had to skip the site review at that point. Is that correct? Because you didn't call me as the applicant, you called the owner at the hotel and he couldn't leave his work for that. I do have them here, and I do want to just say that I think for all these reasons and for all the questions about what actually was built and when it was built, and for the visible element of this house, for the discrepancy in the window styles and the use of different window styles, the fact that the footprint has been expanded numerous times, and now the property is encircled in a fairly high wall that couldn't be built today. I think for those reasons, it should be considered non-contributing.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And Heather, did you want to add something?
Yes, Chair Rios, with reference to going on to a property, I mean, certainly we've had an example recently of Mount Carmel where we got access to a courtyard in order to look at, the interior courtyard of a meme design building. And so, there are situations where we actually do need to go into interior spaces, not inside the building itself, but interior courtyard spaces in order to be able to judge for ourselves, and the board to judge also as to what determine their thoughts relative to status.
I understand. I'm not saying you don't have the right to look at the house. I'm saying it could have been done a little differently. Instead of saying we had no access to the house, so you're tabled.
Well,
Could
with
have
reference to that,
contacted the applicant and said, we'll need access.
if I may finish, it was me that was trying to make the phone calls and I was desperate. It seemed like the front door was open to the house and we were trying to get in touch with somebody who may have been inside. I would imagine the front door wouldn't normally be left open. And so I was quickly trying to contact somebody. So my apologies for not contacting you.
No, it'd be good if you contact the applicant because I'm the one that's actually representing him and they both were gone. And he was like, I couldn't leave the hotel then and I'm sorry. And I was like, okay, I didn't know they needed access, but it just helps us to know if there's parts of a building that you need specific access to, that's all. But I stand for any other questions you have. And actually, I think I'd like to have the owners, if they'd like to just speak about living in this house. Her family's owned it since the 70s. And I'd like them, and I think you all are familiar who Amanda Crocker's father is. Ed Crocker.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so he's actually someone that probably will be helping us with this house too. So I think if Amanda could just say a word about living in the neighborhood. And I think if you look at what happened in 1968 when they created the park, and there was a lot of noise, that was one of the places we used to go. So I know there was a lot of noise there in the 70s. And I know that they built those walls for a reason. Actually, most of those houses along that line that access the park have built walls between them and the park, which I'm not commenting on building walls, but I'm commenting on the fact that it appears to be every house along that area kind of made sure they had some separation from the public park.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think that there were walls there at one time, and then they probably did because of the park. Okay. If you'll just get sworn in, please.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Amanda Crocker, 1120 East Alameda, Santa Fe. So I guess the first thing I wanted to say is that we've been referencing the glass block as a bedroom, and it's not a bedroom. It doesn't have a closet. It's just a glass block. It's more of a sunroom, and it's actually where my 12-year-old son sleeps, because there is no other real room for him. And it's of course incredibly inefficient. He's freezing in the winter and sweltering in the summer. But so that's just a small point. To the larger point, which is a very strange building, right? I mean, I love it. My aunt has owned it since I was born and I've always wanted to live in it, and it finally came true. And we were able to start to buy it from her. But it's exceedingly strange. Like it has one really long, like sala, almost like bedroom with these strange offices off of it. And then it has the normal kitchen and thing, but then it has this glass block that we use as a bedroom. And so the vernacular like sense of the whole thing makes it actually very difficult to inhabit. And all we really are looking to do is to make it a home that's habitable for a family, which is, I mean, we live on the park. It's perfect. My kid is 12 years old. We love living on the park. The basketballs come over our wall. Like it should be a family home. And I totally respect historical structures. My family has worked in historic preservation for years. I worked for Cornerstones for years. I know what it is to be a steward of a historic structure, but I also believe that there can be a balance between a historic structure and one that can be livable. And so I would just like to, I guess, just sort of mirror what Eric is saying, that it's too funky put together. It's a little too vernacular to I think be considered contributing, because it's in, what I would say to my friends, it's kind of a hot mess, the building that we love.
Yeah. Amanda, thank you very much for your comments. Anyone else on the team?
We're not going to add 5,000 square feet, a casita, a 3-car garage. That's not what this job is. That's not what this job is for us. It's to make
Well,
this house
and we
work for
can't
them.
talk about that right now.
I know.
About what
I
you're
know.
saying.
I can talk about it being a family home and it not
Yeah.
working for them though.
Thank you, Eric.
Okay, just want to let you know.
Okay. So now I will call for public comment. I see that John's ready to say something.
John Eddy. Madam Chair, board members, this is a good challenge, and this is why we live in Santa Fe. Because we still have buildings like this. This building is a hot mess, I agree. I'm sure it's difficult to live in. But this building is a study in historicity, transition, adaptation, and creative adaptive reuse currently. That's the challenge on this building. I think that there are certain elements on the building that, though they are probably grandfathered in, they may not have been permitted many years ago, but they're grandfathered in now. And they speak to transition. Pitched roof on this house of metal speaks to a transition, an adaptive use of materials. The window wall, the window corner speaks to adaptation of the space. Evidently, there were one or more artists that lived in this house at one time, so their energy is in this house as well and can be very easily erased if too many changes are allowed to happen here. So I would like you to be careful on this, because in many ways, it does fit all the characters of a house that should be called contributing. Code may restrict you from doing that, but this house fits a lot of that, and it speaks to our history on many levels. And I appreciate that. The way the walls have evolved around trees, etc. And the applicant is very right that a lot of noise happened in that park in certain years. And the people that were living there had to adapt to that. So you've got a good challenge, and I am looking forward to your discussion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, John. Anyone else wishing to comment from the public or on Zoom?
Chair Rios, Ms. Beninato would like to speak. Ms. Beninato, you may unmute.
Stephanie Beninato. I agree with member Bienvenu's comments and also Chair Rios's comments. I think that this house should be labeled contributing. And everything that's been described here is prior to 1973, making this house over 50 years old, built in again, a way that if you went from an agricultural building where maybe you were more or less camping out to one where you were living on an everyday basis, all those changes are just very typical. And again, we don't have a lot of vernacular buildings. I think that the northwest facade, it should be the primary facade, but there's really been no talk about which facade you would designate. And I think that both the architect and the owner should know that just because it's designated as contributing, that it doesn't mean that you can't change anything. Certainly you can change the inside configuration, and there are other, whatever isn't primary, depending again on certain things, could be added onto. So I don't think it's like a doom for being able to make it a more livable house, given that you knew what you were getting into, that it was in your family for 50 years. So I do hope you vote to make it contributing, and I would look forward to some discussion on which facade you would consider primary. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wishing to speak?
No, Chair Rios.
Member Berkeley.
Thank you, Chair Rios. This is maybe a question for staff. Comment too. I feel like the applicant's being defensive about something. I'm not sure we're at that stage yet. I was curious if it did get redesignated to contributing, what would be the next step in the process? I mean,
Chair Rios, Member Berkeley, with the designation of contributing and the adoption of the findings of fact and conclusions of law, the applicant, if there were any changes proposed to the building, would have to comply with the criteria of the code, not just for design, but also for preservation.
and at what point though would the primary elevations and so forth be designated now or another meeting?
If the building were to be classified as contributing, the primary facade should be designated tonight.
And also, I want to remind the board that if the board feels that there are certain portions of the building that is non-historic, that can also be indicated. I don't know what the route the board is going to take, but if the board has no further questions or comments, or maybe we do. Member Vicha.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few comments on this project. I really appreciate the vernacular tradition in this city and in particular in this neighborhood. So it's with that perspective that I'm looking at this. In designating a status to a building, we're to identify the character defining features that contribute to the neighborhood or the streetscape. And in this project, I struggled to find that. I think the most compelling character of this building is in its story. That sort of leads to my appreciation for the family ties to this property. In this case, I think that will allow a vernacular tradition to continue. You're obviously wanting to adapt the house to your current needs and honoring your family that's lived there for decades. With respect to character defining features, it's not the roof. The massing has changed over time. There's not really an architectural detail I can point to that requires preserving. It's a cool collection of things with a really interesting background, but I don't think that it rises to the level of contributing. So I would support a designation of non-contributing.
Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're coming up on an hour on a status review case here tonight. And I guess I'm frustrated with that. I'm frustrated with our process. As a preservation architect and as a citizen of Santa Fe, I am troubled by how unrigorous our conversation about the status of this building has been tonight. I think a lot of that can be laid at the feet of our code, which, in terms of laying out status as buildings was not principally done necessarily for a preservation intent. It was done for a style control intent. It's clear that the historian's report here speaks to that, and Member Beachside's testimony speaks to that issue, one that we're familiar with, whether or not a building contributes style-wise to a streetscape or to the styles that are contained within a district. Our ordinance also does not have a statement of significance and this is something that could be addressed in our current code hygiene exercise, that provides guidance both to staff, to applicants, to the citizens of Santa Fe about what we value in a particular historic district as important. Right now, everything's up for grabs. The board says, well, it's old, it's important, or this history's interesting, and the house evolved this way, and the family history and who it's associated with. 100% true across the board, but we don't have agreement on what the period of significance or the statement of significance is. We're not articulating as a community what we find important in these districts. There has been an overlay of the National Register District for this area, but it is too awfully broad. And it just says buildings in Santa Fe are old, and they are of many old styles. And so it's important to retain them. I really struggle to find, the guidance here. And to me, just because something's old is not good enough. It's certainly within the purview of the board to make a case and designate a building as contributing beyond the historians, John Murphy's recommendations. But and it certainly, it would certainly be beneficial for staff to provide a more decisive conclusion about the reading of that report and a recommendation to the board, so that we're not just kind of at sea and open for such discussion here. I would love to see one day where these values are articulated a lot more clearly, and we can hire a consultant to not only write these reports, but also make the basic recommendations that the board could review a lot more quickly. Right now, everything is just simply too much up in the air. If we make a decision tonight, it certainly would be based on precedent. It would be based on a lot of feeling, and not necessarily any of the things that I'm pointing to as part of preservation practice. I am of the mind that, given what I've heard tonight, what I've read in the report that was done by a preservation professional, and what I know about our historic ordinance, and what has not yet been said about what we value culturally, that I'm not willing to say that this is a contributing building to the district. This is clearly, in my mind, a non-contributing structure and should remain so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? It appears not, so I will entertain a motion. Member Benveni.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just comment in response. I don't think it's that vague nor difficult. Our ordinance clearly states that a contributing structure is one that contributes to the character of the district. What is undefined is the character. That really needs to be fixed. We need to have an ordinance that actually says for each one of our historic districts, these are the characteristics that define that character. But I don't think it's disputable at this point in time that these old vernacular hand-built buildings along the acequias and next to the river in the agricultural section of town define the character of that district. I mean, that is what that district is, from that area where that building is located all the way up the canyon on Upper Canyon Road and on Cerro Gordo side, which was all agricultural land. So it just doesn't seem like a difficult question to me. And to me, it's reverse engineering to start with seeking character defining features, which applies to primary facades. And then and being unable to do that to a degree sufficient to say it's contributing. It's the contributing status comes first in my mind, and then the primary facade designation comes second. And in this particular case, I don't think that's difficult either. The character defining features of this building is the simple vernacular accretive change over time that's well over 50 years old and is extremely characteristic of that style of building. So I would maybe before I make the motion, make one request. In my mind, the most obvious primary facades, if this were to be designated as a contributing structure, would be the most visible facade, which is along the driveway, which would be the north facade, and then the facade facing the parking area, the entry to the park, which would be, do I have that right? No, that would be the north facade, the one with the wall in the front, and then it would be the east facade where the driveway is. What's staff's review? Staff's view if this were to be designated as contributing?
Chair Rios, Member Bienvenu. So you're speaking of the entry facade on the sort of north-ish elevation, and then the other east facade that's right next to the parking area. Are those the two facades that you speak?
Yes.
Staff would concur.
Well, we'll see where we go. I'll make a motion in case number 2020. And I also want to just make one more mention that I do agree that in everything we're doing is without relationship to making the house livable. That can all be brought back before us. And I don't know that it's going to be designated contributing, but even if it were to be, that does not prohibit alterations to make it livable. That's exactly what the exceptions are created for. In case number 2023-006569 HDRB 1120 East Alameda Street, I would move that findings be entered that this structure is more than 50 years old and helps to establish and maintain the character of the historic district in which it is located. And for that reason, I would move that this structure be designated as contributing and that the primary facades be the north and east facades.
Is there a second to this motion?
Berkeley seconds.
Anything further to add? Roll call vote, please.
Member Berkeley? Member Beachside?
No.
Member Bienvenu?
Yes.
Member Guida?
No.
Madam Chair, you have a tie.
I vote in the affirmative.
Yes, the motion has been approved.
And again, I just want to say that even though this has been designated contributing, it does not mean that you cannot make changes to this building. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll move on to the next case, which is located at 117 V Hill Lane. Is the applicant here? The applicant is here.
Madam Chair, I'm going to recuse.
Let the record show that Member Bienvenu is leaving his post because he is recusing himself from this case. And Heather, may we have your report, please?
Yes, Chair Rios, thank you. This site is located at the corner of the intersection of Camino Santander and V Hill Lane at that northeast corner of that intersection, highlighted in the yellow with the blue arrow. As you can see, the building has many different components to it, which I will outline shortly. It is located in the downtown and east side historic districts. This is a view of the building on the bottom of the front of the building. It is mostly concealed from the street by a yard wall, an existing yard wall. There are no changes proposed to the yard wall. And there will be some changes that are proposed that won't be visible from this elevation, but from another point of view it will be. And I'm sorry, the elevation with the garage door faces V Hill Lane, and that would be the west elevation. So with reference to the elevation that abuts the property to the east, mostly because of the grade change, there is a blank wall with the exception of that second story piece that sticks up from the grade of the house. And that portion of the building that faces the property adjacent on V Hill Lane predominantly is defined by a blank wall and the garage structure with a step. This is the orientation of the site and illustrating both the entryway as well as the different components of the existing building. You can see highlighted here in the light gray the applicant's proposals for a partial enclosure of the portal, not the complete enclosure, to create a sitting room and connection between the guest house and the main residence. The addition of a portal and movement or infill of portal to be able to move an entryway to the towards the front of the site. There would be a pantry addition that would be on that east elevation. In addition, you can see that there will be also some replacement of windows and also the insertion of windows on that elevation that faces the abutting property. I will make note that the HDRB, after the issuance of the packet, did receive an email with reference to a correspondence that we received from that neighbor. And the enclosure of the sitting room highlighted with this larger circle illustrates that connection between the two structures. And the pantry addition, which would be one story, won't be the same mass of the adjacent two-story mass. And of course, the sort of reintroduction of a portal and expansion of the entry on that elevation adjacent to the garage. Furthermore, the garage itself will be, the doors will be replaced with a different style of door instead of the panel door that is currently in place. With reference to the owner's suite, in staff's review of the proposal, it was noted that one of the openings was not located at least 3 feet from the corner as required by code, by the design standards. And so the applicant has agreed to move that particular window so that it does comply with that standard there on the north elevation. I'm sorry. So the windows that would be inserted are here on that north elevation. And once again, there's the elevation view of that window that would be required to be moved. Furthermore, you can see the infill and addition of the portal there adjacent to the garage on that north elevation, the view there. And there are some window infill on that second story, that window infills that are proposed. The existing window that is there is undivided, but it is approved. This house was built in the 1990s. And you can see that all of the new additions will include divided light windows as required by code. And with reference to that pantry area, the addition on that eastern facade, which will not very much be publicly visible. You can see that also has divided light windows. And that's a view once again of the west facade. I've been speaking about with the garage doors changed to have windows within those garage doors. And this is a view as from the street showing the infill section of the portal and the existing elevation as well. Photographs. So the east elevation with the garage, the north elevation with the garage and that two-story mass where windows are proposed. The view of the front facade with the garage and also the view showing the existing entranceway that is proposed to be changed. The portal on that other elevation where it's partially going to be enclosed. And that enclosure is going to take place in this corner area, the sort of L area between the guest house and the main house. and a view of what the area where the pantry addition would be taking place. So staff's recommendation is staff finds that all criteria for approval have been met, in that these additions will have similar materials, height, and architectural treatments and style, with the condition that the windows be located 3 feet from the corner as required by code.
Thank you for your report, Heather. What was the reasoning for the neighbor objecting to the 3 windows on the north second story?
Chair Rios, in the correspondence we received, when this house was originally built, there was a lot of concern for privacy with the neighbor. And that is the reason it was designed without any openings. And that's the reason for the objection. The neighbor is the loss of privacy on that elevation.
Thank you. Any other questions for Heather? Will the applicant please come forward and get sworn in?
You swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Solomon Velasquez, 302 Catherine Street, Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Yes, Mr. Velasquez, what do you have to tell us about this case?
Well, I think Heather did a wonderful job. I don't really have much to add other than, we can certainly move the window to meet the code to be 3 feet away from the corner. I'm not exactly sure how to respond as far as the objection from the neighbor. I mean, we all, have neighbors next to us, and there's windows that that open up to our neighbors. So I think I understand that they might feel that it'll be somewhat of an encroachment of them being able to be visible, but I think it's a standard in which we all live in our neighborhoods.
Velasquez, any questions for the applicant? Yes, Berkeley.
I just had a question about what was the reasoning behind adding the 3 windows?
Yes, so, generally it's, good natural light and ventilation to get windows or openings from opposing walls, as opposed to just having, 1 window on 1 wall.
Member Beachside?
Have you spoken with the neighbors, or have your clients attempted to come to us any sort of compromise or consideration?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't think that the client has, not that they've told me.
Yeah, and did you consider another design, fewer windows on that top story?
I think that the client would probably want to speak to the neighbor to assure them, but I can't speak to that. I wasn't aware of there being a complaint from the neighbor.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously not prevented by our code, but just being a good neighbor, it might be worth sort of having that conversation to make sure you can both live peacefully.
Sure, yeah.
Member Berkeley?
Just one more question. Heather, you mentioned in the original design plan for that house, consideration was made toward not putting windows in that wall because of the neighbor?
Chair Rios, Member Berkeley, if you take a look at the minutes when that was originally approved, there were concerns raised at that time. And so that is probably, typically, we don't like to see sheer walls like that, as it's not characteristic of recent Santa Fe style, but I believe that was a concession.
Anything else, board members? No? Anyone from the public wishing to speak on this project, please come forward and get sworn in. Yes.
Are you both going to be speaking? Okay. 2 minutes. Okay, so I'll swear you both in at the same time.
Okay.
Okay, do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimonies you're about to give are the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. When you step to the podium, please state your name.
My name is Fabrizio Giovannini. We live right next door to the 117. And we've been living in the house for almost 27 years. And we enjoy tremendously the patio. And by The addition, we object to addition of the 3 window on the north side of the house because it will be overlooking our living room and our patio, which we tremendously enjoy the whole summer. And so that's the only objection that we had about the additional of the window. We have 5 different owners that changed next door in 27 years. And each individual owner spent tremendous amount of money on renovation. So this is the 6th owner. So we wonder if they're going to be living there or they're just using as an investment. For us, you know, the house has been our home for 27 years. We just really upset about the whole situation with the window. About 5 years ago, I went through with owner number 3, the same situation about building 1 window, which overlooked our living room and our patio. So that would take away the enjoyment for us the whole summer, sitting down and having dinner in the patio. To have somebody inviting our privacy. So we really strongly object about that. And I sent pictures of the window also from our house overlooking the wall. And we try, you know, we used to have a tree, which died unfortunately, which was protecting an apartment. But still, it was okay. But to have somebody overlooking our home, it really upset us. So I would like my wife to explain a little more because my accent is not leaking.
Just fine.
I'm sorry. By the way, I'm sorry. And I want to apologize this week for the April 11 not to show up because we both have COVID. So that's the reason why we didn't come. Thank you.
The applicant didn't come either.
Okay, and it's true, we're part. Lori Brody, 115 E Hill Lane. New Mexico. This is in all these years that we've lived in the neighborhood.
You'll speak right into that mic so we
In
can.
all the years we've lived in the neighborhood, we've really become a part of the neighborhood. We've been friendly with all of our neighbors. And as my husband said, the 5 previous owners all decided not to build windows, understanding it's not just a little bit of intrusion. It is really looking down on our yard and into our living room, our whole yard. And I have to say, in speaking to your point, we don't know these people. We've never met them. So it's not personal, but we do feel that had we looked at this house 27 years ago with those windows, we probably would not have bought the house because of the intrusion in privacy. And we don't live in New York or a big city where that's an accepted fact, where you do give up some of your privacy. We live here in Santa Fe, and it's incredibly important to us to have our privacy. We also worry that it would affect the value of our house. We wouldn't have bought it, and we would assume that other people wouldn't buy it either, given those circumstances. It's not like there's a setback, it's just right there. And so we're asking that those windows aren't approved. I mean, if they had clear story windows or something, we wouldn't, I don't think of. Whoops, all right.
Thank you both very much. Anyone else in the audience
Can I-
wishing to comment?
You get the 2 minutes.
Okay, we sent picture of, I don't see it on the monitor over there. So, okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you both very much.
I was just, Chair Rios, I was just pulling up the email, their correspondence while they were talking. This is what we forwarded to you, but I did want to refresh your memories in terms of the photographs. This is the courtyard of which they speak with the subject house beyond and additional photograph that they provided as well as part of.
Thank you. Mr. Eddie, are you wishing to comment?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. I think the neighbors have put some pretty compelling arguments forward to you. I know that privacy of neighbors is not necessarily, I'm not sure if it's in your purview, but I think it's something that you do need to consider because we all live together here. And the neighbor mentioned clerestory windows, which is maybe not the right architectural term, but I would like to, I can understand that they would like to see some fenestrations on that elevation. But I have a question of staff. What is the height of that room of the upper story? The ceiling height?
I will have to research that. Just one moment.
Yes, thank you.
It may be best as I don't have an interior drawing. There may be a section, but I can defer to the applicant to answer that.
I think the applicant would have the answer to that.
Thank you. Well, my suggestion was that perhaps fenestrations can be put which are above eye level in that room so that people are not directly looking out a window and down so easily in that situation, which obviously impacts the privacy of the neighbors. I don't know if this is a design element that can be discussed a little bit with the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eddie. Anyone else in this audience wishing to comment on this project? Anyone on Zoom?
Yes, Chair Rios, Ms. Beninato. You may unmute.
Thank you. Thank you. Stephanie Beninato, PO Box 1601, Santa Fe, New Mexico. I just want to make sure that the window in the pantry is also going to be 3 feet from the corner, because I didn't know that that was one that was circled, but it looked like it was too close to the corner when it was up on the screen. And I think the wall, in a sense, looks better with windows. I can see that they would be very intrusive. And I wonder if maybe then the owners could agree to, for example, to use opaque glass, something like that, where again, they could open them, they'd get the air, they get light, but they wouldn't necessarily see directly down into the next door neighbor's yard. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Applicant, have you all considered something such as using opaque glass or anything of that sort?
Well, I think if we used opaque glass, there wouldn't be natural light. But if you were to pull up the photo, just because again, this is the first time that I'm hearing this, if you could pull up the photo that the neighbor sent.
Certainly, just one moment.
And the point that I just want to make when the photo is up is, you know, obviously the photo's been taken now during winter. Things are just now starting to flower and leaves are starting to grow. And I would say that the height of the deciduous tree in that photo, is it? Yeah. You know, as it starts to grow its leaves in that it is obscuring the view into that courtyard during the summer months as well.
Thank you. Board members, I'm turning it to you. Member Guida.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion.
Yes, please.
Case 2023-006-566 HDRB 117 V Hill Lane. I move that the board approve the application as submitted, noting that the applicant will update the window placement on the north elevation to be 3 feet from the corner. We'll update staff with revised drawings for that item. That's all.
Is there a second?
Each I will second.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Berkeley,
No.
Member Beachside,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue. Oh, excuse me,
Excuse.
excuse me, Member
He's
Guida.
recused.
Yes.
This case.
Madam Chair, the motion has been approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me get member Benvenu back here and we're going to listen to Heather's case, which is 418 Apodaca Hill.
Thank you, Chair Rios, members of the board. This property is located on Apodaca Hill, not too far from Upper Canyon Road. This case is 2023-6567, and the building is located within the downtown and east side historic district. As you can see, this is located to the east of Camino Cabra on Apodaca Hill. The street further to the east is Camino Militar. And as we conducted our site visit today, we accessed it via Canyon Road. And so originally, as is noted in the historic information, the Hickby, this structure and many of these structures in this area was associated with a Canyon Road address instead of the Apodaca Hill address it has today. The core structure was built in the 1930s. There's a graphic showing the street network as it was originally, where Apodaca Hill did not go very far up into far parallel to Camino Cabra. This construction is a vernacular construction, is typical. It has had additions over time and changes to respond to needs of the family. So the bay window on the east elevation that you saw in that first photograph that was added between the 1970s and 1990s. There's also been window replacement there on that primary facade with the aluminum slider, and the door has been replaced as well. And there was also an addition that was done on the west elevation at the rear of the house in 2016. This is a photograph illustrating where that addition is under construction on that non-primary elevation. Originally in 2016, there was a status designation that was done, and the primary elevations that were considered were the east elevation here and this portion of at the L of that north elevation. So the proposed addition will be approximately 2,026 square feet. The applicant has requested an exception for an addition that is larger than 50% of the existing footprint. It will be attached to that northeast corner of the existing building. The applicant has also requested an entrance portal on the north elevation, for which is permitted. In addition to a primary elevation is permitted, provided that that addition can be removed and the original structure can be reintroduced. So it does not change the nature of the structure necessarily, but can be removed in the future. The applicant also has written that there are needs for additional space relative to family needs, and also needs relative to the stepping down of the building. If, for instance, an addition were to be added to the rear, as was done in 2016, that would not provide accessibility due to the need to step down the hillside. And you can see the topography goes down pretty radically at the rear of the house with those contour lines on that graphic on the left. This is an elevation of the addition that illustrates this would be facing to the east, showing the large windows as divided light windows, as well as a divided light door. With the garage doors, there is a storage area as well as a two-car garage that's proposed. The west elevation butts up to an adjacent structure and has no window openings, but does have stepping associated with it and changes in height and massing. And the applicant also, the illustration of the east elevation where the entrance is located, you can see the portal is very simple in nature and character and would be able to be removed. and the elevation does have stepping associated with it, but no openings on this facade. So staff finds that all approval criteria have been met in the similar materials, height, architectural and treatments and style. Staff also finds that the exception criteria have been met, does not damage the character of the district, does not cause an injury to the public welfare, and strengthens the heterogeneous character of the city through utilizing different design options. Staff will add that on that elevation that faces the street, there was a discussion about having some form of opening facing the street to provide visual interest, but the applicant declined, and certainly it does comply still with the design standards as set forth by the code. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Any questions or comments? None. Applicant or applicants, please come forward and get sworn in.
Are you both going to speak? Yes. Okay, thank you. Please raise your right hands. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimonies you're about to give are the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Tricia Cochran, 418 Apodaca Hill, Santa Fe, 87501.
Gary Copran, 418 Apodaca Hill, Santa Fe, 87501.
This has been our home. This is, I'm surrounded by relatives. I'm surrounded by my mother, brother, numerous cousins up and down the hill. A lot of the buildings were built by relatives. So there is a vested interest to continue to live here and for me personally, is a continuation of the cultural growth, even though that it's a different time than when you saw the hill in its an original state, but it's home. And right now we can't even, our son came home during COVID, and we can't even accommodate him. So, but this is something that we've always wanted to do and had previously discussed with previous board members. And the way that you see it set up is upon those recommendations, because this home has changed numerous times. Windows have been added, changed. There's nothing original. I believe nothing original to the house. So anyway, that's, unless the board has any specific questions, I'm done. And this is my husband.
Did you wish to speak, sir?
Do you have anything?
I really don't have anything to add other than the garage. We don't currently have a garage. And with the crime that's been going on in Santa Fe lately, we felt we needed to add a garage and some storage space to secure our cars and our property.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant, board members? None at this time. Anyone from the public wishing to speak on this project? It looks like no one from this audience. Anyone on Zoom?
Yes, Chair Rios. Stephanie Beninato, you may unmute.
Stephanie Beninato. I'm just not sure from the conversation whether this house is contributing or non-contributing. Could you clarify that, please?
It's contributing, Stephanie.
Okay, thank you. I understand the need for, or the need to, or the belief that you need more security, but I think the garage and the storage door are very non-harmonious with the east side. And they need a redesign and perhaps something that's not so obvious, something more set back. And it's really hard to believe that if there are 3 people living there, maybe I don't understand, because it was the son who came home, that you need another over 2,000 square feet. It just seems like a large addition that compromises the original house, in my opinion, because again, it's more than 50 square feet, and I'd like to hear what the square footage of the original house is. I don't think that's been clearly stated. Also, the criteria about not harming the public welfare. I think that I don't know what addition really would harm the public welfare unless it was like in the middle of the street. So I'm not sure what that really means. And it certainly isn't really a hardship as such. Because again, there is other ways of doing this that have been rejected, partly because of topography, but it's not an impossible thing to overcome that. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Anyone else? No one else on Zoom? No one else here? Board members, do you have comments? If you don't, I will entertain a motion.
I can also respond to some of those. The garage is not facing the street view. And as mentioned, it's a need to, because of the theft that has occurred, it is a security issue. And the other important thing is that I have neighbors on both sides, and garages are common. The neighbors on both sides have garages. The neighbors across the street, two of them also have simple garages. Some are 2-car garages, some are. There's if you go up and down that hill, you see numerous types of structures and numerous sizes of structures.
Thank you. Board members, motion, please. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll make a motion. I just want to preface this by saying that I appreciate the applicant's thorough responses to the exception criteria. I think that they're very well done and conveyed your need clearly for the addition, and staff did a great job of including the history on this project. So we know that a previous board approved a similar exception for exceeding greater than 50% of the footprint that was previously approved. And the HICP report also supports downgrading this status, although it's not on the agenda for tonight, but just a point of information. So in case 2023-06567 HDRB at 418 Apodaca Hill, I move to approve the application as submitted, noting that the exception criteria have been met and consistent with staff's recommendation.
Guido will second.
Anything further to add? Nothing further. Roll call vote, please.
Member Berkeley,
Yes.
Member Beachside,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue,
Yes.
Member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. And it delights me that a longtime Santa Fe family is still going to be living in that home. I'm going to guess that your last name, maiden name might be Apodaca. They named Apodaca Hill for the Apodacas.
Yeah. And my mom is the last Apodaca there. So
Well, good luck
there's
with your
lots of
home.
cousins that some have sold out, but thank you.
And just a quick reminder to the applicant, we're going to have to get approval from the city council and about this exception. So I will be reaching out to you. Thanks.
And we have the 3 new cases under new business, and the first one I thought was Paul's case. And I guess he's coming forward. And that's at 635 A West San Francisco. Yes. Oh, that's your case. Oh, that's correct. I just put it incorrectly. It's Ramon's case. Sorry, Ramon.
Okay.
Talk to us about it.
Just a moment to get my computer up and running.
Okay. So as you stated, it's 635A West San Francisco Street. It's contributing, its status is contributing. It's attached, it's adjoined to the north by 635B West San Francisco Street, forming a duplex. The duplex is built in the territorial style. The actual date of construction is difficult to determine, but first shows up in addresses, postal addresses in 1928. It's adobe construction. Let's go. This is the location. It's almost to Paseo del Peralta. This is the existing east and existing south elevations. The east elevation is partially obscured by a yard wall that was built sometime in the 70s maybe, but the coyote fence was administratively approved to 6 feet in 2018. This is the south street facing elevation. A single window, security bars, and I believe John Murphy in his report states that the windows were replaced relatively recently, like 2006. So they are wood over-unders, but they're not really considered historic. This is the southeast elevation. It kind of shows the corner of the 635A, and you can just see the duplex in the far. This is a gate to the portion of the east elevation. And I should state that the packet this is only for primary facade designation. And the packet includes additional information that was prepared by the applicant in preparation for coming before the board for a later project. But staff suggested that before he do that, let's get the primary facades designated so we could have a better idea of how to handle what he wants to do next. With that said, staff recommends the southern portion of facade number 1 is indicated in the diagram, and a portion of the east facade be designated as primary. Now, do you have any questions?
Board members, Member Benvenu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Ramon, on the site visit, I thought it was clear that the entire facade 1,
yes,
which would be the east facade, was of a piece. I mean, it was very clearly the original building. It's true, there's a low patio wall, 6 feet. Well, it's probably 4.5 feet high or something, plus some coyote fencing on top of that to make it 6 feet. But I just don't really see the idea of stopping at that little patio wall that's kind of stuck against this beautiful historic facade. So in my mind, both facade 1 and 2 would be primary. What are your thoughts?
We went around and with that. Primarily because of the ordinance that allows yard walls up to 6 feet after they're 20 feet from the public right of way. That wall could easily go up to 6 feet. And it would obscure that portion of the facade from the streetscape. So
obscure, but not, I mean, you would still see the facade above the wall, right? I mean, how high is the east elevation of the building? 12 or 14, I don't know, 12 feet.
To give you an idea that the coyote fence on top of the brick wall, that's at 6 feet high.
Right.
But you'd still be able to see it, a portion of it.
Sure. And that, I mean, it's kind of unfortunate that that patio wall is there. I totally understand the practicality of it, given the need for some outdoor space. But it does obscure to some extent that facade. But I think that facade is still extremely important. You can see it. The wall, patio wall was added on. It could be removed in the future potentially or changed.
All true.
Yes, Heather.
Chair Rios, member Bienvenue, one of the things to note, the approval date of 2018 for those yard walls. This certainly has more to do with the future case, but approvals by the H board are good for 3 years. After that time, they do have to return for another approval. So upon confirming the date, if it is greater than 3 years, that would have to be consideration brought back to the H board under a different application.
Thank you. Yeah, okay. Well, I guess I'm just expressing my view that I think the entire east facade is character defining.
I'm not going to speak for the client, but you can see the change of the elevations of the parapet, and that's right where the duplex adjoins.
Oh,
And their entrance is just right around that corner behind that pine tree. So they were, I think the intent behind that yard wall was to create some privacy for themselves from their adjoining neighbors.
what you describe as facade one, though, on your diagram is does not include the adjacent residence, right?
That's correct.
So that's when I refer to facade one, I'm just referring to unit A's eastern facade.
Because the neighbor's application is not before us.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions, board members? Anyone from the public wishing to speak on this? Oh, of course, the applicant. I don't know why I'm forgetting that. I keep looking at Anthony and he wants me to hurry.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Richard Martinez, 1524 Paseo de Peralta.
So Richard, let me apologize to you again. Sorry. I do want to hear from you.
Thank you.
So you have the floor now.
But it was my fault.
It's
Well, as you can see from this diagram, the house that we're talking about is very small. And it is on property lines on 3 sides, on the south side, on the west side, and on the north side. It's attached actually to the neighboring house and on the property line. And so the only space where you can enter the house, where you can have any private space, where you can have any outdoor space, is that east facade. It seems to me that given the circumstances of the house, that the facade number 2 is very important and is defining the house. I would propose that all of facade number 1 would not be primary. It's within our property. It has the parking and the only private space available for the house, and it is most likely because it has doors, 2 doors on that facade, which don't have any covering, any shade, any outdoor space that doesn't have is roofed. It doesn't have any roof area outside, a portal or such. And so I propose that only the primary facade would be facade number 2.
Thank you, Richard. Now I will ask for public comment. Anybody wanting to speak on this project? No one? Oh, yes. Someone's coming forward. Run. Don't walk. It's Mr. John Eddy. He's already been sworn in.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll simply state that I believe that the observations made by Board Member Bienvenue are accurate here. I believe that facade number 1 is of a piece. It's a continuation. And any disruption of that is something that should be very carefully considered. I can understand the need for some covering on that wall, but I see where this may be headed. And I think that that facade should be considered contributing as well. Thank you. That corner is very, very evident on our streetscape on San Francisco. And it speaks very well on that streetscape. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reddy. Anyone else? Zoom?
Yes, Chair Rios. Stephanie Benenato would like to speak. You may unmute.
Thank you, Stephanie Benenato. I agree with Mr. Eddy and with Member Bienvenu. I think that both 1 and 2 should be primary facades. And I don't think what you want to do with the house should be the focus of the conversation about it. It's whether they're character defining, etc. And I do believe that you can see the number 1 facade, the long facade, from the street there on the corner. And whether cars are parking there or not, it's still visible. And I think it's important to the streetscape as well as the facade that is on the street. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If there are no further comments and no questions, I will entertain a motion. Member Guida, did you have something?
I just had a comment, and I'd be happy to make a motion, but just while I have some access to the discussion that the east facade could be considered yet another primary facade for the building, I would, and we could also note that yard walls and this portal could be added to a primary facade. We just looked at a case where we added a portal to a primary facade. I would note that by designating facade number 2, the street facade, as primary, it by necessity would convey 10 feet back from it as well. So, so effectively it would be staff's recommendation, which, admittedly is reverse engineered from the proposal. But to me, designating 2 alone would, by necessity, head off any addition in the future from being right up against it. It would have to be set back 10 feet. The mass, that facade and the kind of linear aspect of the building would be conveyed by that minimum designation, in my view. That's all I have to say. I would make a motion.
Anybody else? Member Bienvenu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I don't want to interrupt the motion, but just to make a general comment on that. I think that's well stated and logical. On the other hand, to me, that's taking too much that approach is taking too much into consideration what someone wants to do with the property in the future, which we've just recently stated is not something we should be considering when we designate status and primary facades. And so I just want to remove that from my mind, even though I know that probably someday someone wants to do something there. And that was the applicant's actual presentation, what they wanted to do there. And I would just say our job today is to designate the facade. It's not to say what can and can't be done in the future. That is determined by the code without exceptions. There's still things that can be done to a primary facade, and the things that are not necessarily allowed can be allowed through exceptions. And so I think the proper approach is to decide without consideration of the future, which the primary facade should be, and then deal secondarily when an application comes before us with the secondary questions.
Exactly.
Just a general comment.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, absolutely.
If the consideration is the character defining and visibility and all that, why isn't the west facade considered? Why is the east facade considered? Just wondering.
Well, I think all facades are considered. And then if they feel that, if the board feels that they have character defining features, that are worthy of preservation, then they designate those as primary. I think that the west facade, it's just a blank wall.
Yes,
Yeah,
but
which-
it does express the linear nature of the
That
house.
that could be that is very true.
Yes.
So it's up to the board. And Heather, did you have something?
Chair Rios, when we were on our site visit today, I did notice that maybe there were window openings that were enclosed just by shadows on the stucco. And one window opening was altered and so.
On the, you're talking about the
West
west
elevation?
facade?
Yes, I'm sorry. And so it's my understanding that staff did not consider that as primary and as for those reasons.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, member Beaton.
I just want to point out that I think our practice in many cases has been to minimize the number of primary facades, and especially on a house of this size. I think that's extremely relevant. Considering that what we're considering for facade number 2 preserves the street facing like on the actual street and both corners of the rectangular structure. So if there's no other discussion, I'll make a motion. In case number.
It's okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Case number 2023. 06626 HDRB at 635A West San Francisco Street. I move to designate facade number 2, the north facade,
South.
south facade as primary. And only that facade.
Guido will second.
Any further discussion? No. Roll call vote.
Member Berkeley,
Yes.
member Beachside,
Yes.
member Bienvenue,
No.
member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night. And we'll go on to the next case, which is Paul's. And that's located at 416 Acequia Madre.
Good evening, Madam Chair and board members. We are looking at 416 Acequia Madre. 416 Acequia Madre is a proposed 1,573 square foot single-story residential structure located in Plaza Chamisal in the downtown and East Side Historic District. The construction of the home will be U-shaped and fashioned in the old Santa Fe style. The home will be constructed with adobe block. The exterior finish will be cementitious stucco and a hue color of buckskin. The window and door trim shall be painted country blue, blue denim, watercolor blue, and Caribbean blue by Anderson Exterior Colors. The windows are proposed to be true divided light, other woodwork posts and exposed lintels over the windows shall be stained natural. The exterior light fixtures shall be painted patinated punched middle. The canales will be middle lined wood canales. They will be located on the north, east, and south elevations. Here is the main level floor plan. The north and east elevation. The south and west elevation. An overview of the elevations. the building sections. And that's it. Thank you.
Any questions for Paul? No. Applicant, please come forward. Thank you, Paul.
Hi, do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Kayla Bechtel, 1813 Hunter Road. I I guess I'd like to talk about the story poles. I guess you guys saw them today. And I know that the lot is quite tight, but the U shape has afforded lots of open space for my client. And the right amount of parking. And I felt that the volume that is the living room will dominate the house and everything else will kind of fade beyond. And I'm happy to answer questions. Oh, and my client is sort of backing off the Adobe part, so it might be frame. Oh.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I hate to say that, but I better.
Gayla, what, would you reiterate to us the height of the house itself?
The house is 13.6. The total, the living room is 13.6. And then everything else sort of steps down. The master bedroom, I believe, is 12.6. And then everything else is subservient to those two spaces.
And the wall?
Oh, the walls adjacent to this house are between 36 and 4 feet tall, or 3 feet into 4 feet tall. The front wall, the one that's on the driveway, will be short because it'll just be a planter of some kind. But then along the south, where right now there are bushes, there probably will be a 4-foot yard wall and landscaping on both edges. So there'll be more landscaping done on the north and on the south between the vacant lot right now and then the house to the north.
Did I hear Paul indicate different colors of blue? Different.
Oh, he asked me for blue. I said traditional blue. And so I sent him four examples of the Anderson window color. So it will be one of those, not all
Okay.
4 of those.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
But there, I just wanted you to, we hadn't chosen exactly the color. So it'll be one of those colors.
Board members, any questions? Member Benvenu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'll strike out the commendation I was going to give you for building out of Adobe.
I know,
Oh,
thank
yeah.
you.
The main thing I wanted to tell you was how appreciative I am of that. But since it may not be that way, what's the plan for radius of corners, any battering, anything like that to make it look like Adobe?
Yes, we will make it look like Adobe with spray foam and wood frame battered or slant or canted walls.
Okay, I thought maybe they were. I couldn't tell for sure if that was just the perspective, but they are canted. Okay. Great. And do you have any feeling for the radius that you're aiming at?
The outside?
Yeah, the corners. Just something soft, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, whatever Adobe like 2 or 3 inches would be, I guess, but something like this, like your hand.
Sure. Great, thanks.
Anything else? Anyone from the public wanting to speak on this project?
Madam Chair, board members. I'm with member Bienvenue here, and I'm not a fan of faux Adobe in this particular spot. because this is adjacent, my understanding, to the Plaza Valentine. Plaza Valentine is one of our most important historic compounds, which has received a lot of attention in the last couple of years and has received a lot of very careful curation and adaptive reuse of these properties. It's a property that was created by Kate Chapman originally, Plaza Valentine, who was one of our first, we would call vernacular architects, but helped to set Santa Fe style in her characterization of Pueblo Revival style. So the architect has a very difficult challenge to build a building there which will not detract from the character of Plaza Valentine. If this house were built in adobe, I would feel much more secure in the idea that they could fit in this neighborhood. But this is a really important neighborhood, and therein lies the challenge. I don't know what you folks can do with this. Thank you.
John, are you talking about Plaza Valentina or are you talking about Plaza Chamizal?
Is this in Plaza Chamizal? I thought I
Yes, sir,
heard.
it's Plaza Chamizal.
Well, same thing.
Okay. Just
Yes, yes, you're right. I'm sorry. I heard Valentine from the back of the room.
no.
Same arguments stand. Absolutely. And this woman was also a vernacular architect. And I know that the applicant is sensitive to this. So thank you. Sorry for the misinterpretation.
And anyone else?
On Zoom, yes. We will start with Stephanie Benato, followed by Adam Johnson. You may unmute, Stephanie.
Thank you, Stephanie Benato. Actually, Plaza Chamizal was owned by Catherine Stinson Otero and Miguel Otero, who was a prominent DA, and his father was a governor at one point. And Catherine Stinson Otero was the fourth woman aviator in the US, but more importantly, she was a local self-trained architect. And the two-story house that you see in Plaza Chamizal was her house. And she designed all the buildings in Plaza Chamizal. And I've looked at that lot. It's a very small and very tight lot. And so I do think it takes some special consideration. And I think it's particularly important that it doesn't impact Catherine Stinson Otero's home, which you can see from the street. It's directly in front of you when you look down that drive. And so I think the scale of the building is somewhat large for the size of the lot, but I think that's something you'll have to determine if in fact they do meet all the setback requirements and parking, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Benato. Adam, you may unmute.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I think the architect's design is quite handsome. I was excited to see that it was in the old Santa Fe style, including its materials. So I express a little bit of, I am saddened to hear that they might choose to not make it an adobe structure. But I think I'm interested to hear the board's future discussion on this matter. And I think the materials are important in this particular case. I think that Ms. Benato's comments about the history of this particular property are valid, and I would like to hear the board talk about them. Thank you.
Board members, any further comments or questions? If not, I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion. Just a comment before I do. I think this is it certainly would be nice to see an adobe structure go up. It's incredibly difficult to do, both in terms of cost and in terms of the production. I think it's a worthwhile ambition. It often does not pan out, unfortunately. And I think not only the applicant's intent to mimic that material through frame construction, and the detailing, I think, is admirable. But I think more admirable is the scale and quality of the massing, and this project overall is a nicely scaled infill project in a dense urban walkable neighborhood, and that it does a lot of service to the compound that it's in. With that, I'll say that in case 2023-006632 HDRB 416 Acequia Madre, I move that the board approve the project as submitted, noting that it may not be Adobe, that it may be frame construction.
There's a motion. Is there anything further to add?
I
Member Benvenu
I'm sorry.
or Member Beachside, either one of you.
Yeah, that's fine. I was going to second with a clarification, but it's already been seconded. But I just want to clarify that even if it's not an Adobe material, which it may still be, hopefully, and hopefully the applicant has heard some of the comments, and it's clear to me that you would probably like to see that as well. But even if it's not an Adobe material, that the essence of the design as presented to us in terms of its massing, its corners, and its not buttressing, but
Battering.
yeah, battering, canting as well, whatever we want to describe it as depicted in the application would all remain. So I just want to clarify that that was the applicant's representations.
I don't know who actually seconded that. It was
Jen.
Beachside.
Jen.
I think Member Beachside. And then you just said it that. Okay, if there's nothing further to add, may we have a roll call vote?
Member Berkeley,
Yes.
Member Beachside,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue,
Yes.
Member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you, and good luck with the project. And last case is Ramon's, and that's located at 412 Camino Don Miguel.
Bear with me. Technology is a blessing and a curse.
Madam Chair, if I may, while we're doing this, Heather, I did note that although you can't download the file, it does appear in the kind of web browser viewer. So the packet is available for this case.
Thank you.
There we go. Okay. This is case number 2023-006625 HDRB. It's 412 Camino Don Miguel. The historic status is non-contributing. It's in the downtown and east side. Camino Don Miguel is a single family residence listed as non-contributing to the downtown east side. The home is built in Pueblo Revival style. The original construction dates to 1947, but a cinder block addition and second story was added and remodeled in the 80s. So I think that kind of gave it its non-contributing status. It is a beautiful building. The applicant now proposes to add to the, I should point out on the agenda, the size of the bathroom addition is incorrectly identified. The owners wish to build a bathroom of addition of 100.9 square feet to the southeast side of the existing 1,488 square foot residence to a height of 11 feet 4 inches, or 11 feet 4 inches. It would not be visible from the street. They would also like to convert the existing 450 square foot carport into a guest house, retaining the existing adobe walls and roof structure. Modifications to that include a new east wall that would enclose the carport. This east wall would have 2 new windows with divided lights. And on the south facade, there would be also 2 windows and a new portal and 2 windows with divided lights. The project has been reviewed by zoning and it meets PZR setbacks, so we're good there. With that, I'll take any questions. Let me go through my slides real quick. There's the place right there. It's just a little bit south of Acequia Madre and Camino Don Miguel. It's a triangular shaped lot. This is the existing site plan. And the proposed site plan showing the carport enclosed and the bathroom addition. Elevations to the existing house are diagrammed here, and the proposed floor plan of the addition of the bathroom. This would be a photograph of the location of the proposed new bathroom. And the architect's rendering of the bathroom addition. This is the carport, the north facade, and this would be enclosed as indicated on these elevation diagrams. Materials are stucco to match existing, rough sawn Doug fir frame for the windows, and appropriate exterior wood stain for those. With that, I'm open for any questions.
Any questions for Ramon Bird?
Oh,
Yes, Ramon.
staff recommends approval of the proposed application as it complies with section 14-5.2D, general design standards for all historic districts, and 14-5.2E, downtown and east side design standards.
Thank you. So there are no questions from Ramon. So will the applicant please come forward?
You swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Robert Gaylor. The applicant is actually Subi Bowden Associates. Our address is 333 Montezuma Avenue. For the record, you could change the applicant. Subi Bowden Associates.
And if you'll speak right into that mic so we can all hear you, that would be appreciated.
It's Madam Chair and board members. I'm representing Subi Bowden and Associates for 412 Don Miguel, Camino Don Miguel. And I'm open to any questions you may have.
Is that tree going to be near where the bathroom is going to be proposed? Is that you're going to save that tree?
Nope, the tree stays.
Yeah, that's what I.
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. We actually calculated the growth for the next 50 years and placed the wall so that it would not collapse the wall in the future. It's a maple tree. No, it's an oak tree. Pardon me. I'm sorry.
Any other questions or comments? Member Benvenu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one question. Bob, what are we going to do about CCA?
You got all night? But, you know, we've
We'll
talked
talk
about, I
later.
think you and I have talked about this before, haven't we? There's actually some fairly interesting and possibly good news that I can tell you later.
Great, thanks. That's all.
Anything else? Board members? No? Anyone from the public wanting to speak on this particular project?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand you.
I was
Madam-
asking for public comment. And
Oh,
there's
I
no one
see.
here that wants to speak. Anyone on Zoom?
Chair Rios, no.
No one on Zoom. So board members, I will entertain a motion, please. Member Benvenu.
I'll make a motion. Thank you, Madam Chair. Let's see, last case on the agenda, 2023-006625 HDRB 412 Camino Don Miguel. I move that the application be approved as submitted.
Guido will second.
You're changing the 250 to 109 square feet.
Yes. Thank you.
And, roll call vote, please.
Member Berkeley,
Yes.
Member Beachai,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue,
Yes.
Member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad I was quick on the end.
No, that's what happens sometimes for
Thank you.
cases that are long.
Ramon has been great. He's been very helpful, and Lonnie was great, and
Well, that's good to
you
hear.
were all great.
Thank you. Anything under discussion items? Yeah.
Chair Rios, no, there's nothing under discussion items other than, I guess, the introduction for the text amendment got pushed because of some comments from the state attorney's office. We want to get it right. So it should be going for introduction at city council on May 10th. And then we do have to take it to the quality of life subcommittee of the council and bring it back to the full council, hopefully by May 31st.
Thank you. Matters from the board, anybody?
Madam Chair, I do have one. And this is more for informational purposes because I know the rail yard is technically not in the historic district, but I became aware that the Public Works Department is proposing a 52-inch high a black plastic coated metal fence to replace the guard for the entire length of the railway within the rail yard. So from Manhattan to Paseo de Peralta. According to Public Works, the construction drawings are nearly done. They're ready to bid it. It's going to go out in June. There was kind of shock, horror, and surprise from many of the rail yard stakeholders when they found out about this exercise, and even more when they saw the drawings about what it was going to look like. The Public Works Department, the engineers there seem to be expressing a concern about safety. To my knowledge, there haven't been a tremendous, not that there should be any, but I was never aware that the existing barrier to the tracks was a significant concern. They talk about, though the fence has to be this high to prevent X from happening, to prevent people from climbing it, it needs to be super dense. Seems like they're solving problems that they're creating in this process. And I've raised the issue with the mayor's office, with city councilors. I wanted to make sure that in terms of land use, that this is also on your radar, Heather. To me, this is a kind of really there may be a legitimate safety concern in the rail yard, but there's a very high risk here. What's being proposed does not match the founding documents, the general plan, the design guidelines for the rail yard. And we really risk with this kind of double wall bisecting this space, ruining it. What is a kind of world-class and a recognized world-class public space here in Santa Fe. And I just wanted to highlight that for the benefit of the board and for the benefit of the public and land use.
Is that a done deal?
Chair Rios, planning was not consulted regarding that. And so there is a need to review it in terms of the rail yard design standards, There's also the Gross Kelly warehouse building that is immediately adjacent and is a designated landmark. So, and there's other things, if you're not going to block off the streets, but you're going to, there are a lot of patrons in that, or businesses in that area. Would it possibly, I mean, right now there's pedestrian circulation on the streets anyway. I'm not sure that I've ever seen anybody try to walk the tracks other than that area. So, yeah, I will reach out to Ms. Wheeler, the Public Works Director tomorrow to get additional detail.
Thank you, Heather.
Chair
Thank you.
Guida, or
And this is a quick question regarding the preservation awards. Are we, those of us that are going to be present, I'm gonna keep it that is, Member Beachside, Member Rita, and myself, are we going to be presenters?
yes, Chair Rios, we are going to be incorporating, the presenters as well as the, handing out of the awards as well. So.
Will be telling us.
Yeah, we were planning on creating a script. Amanda Romero and I have talked about that with Nicole. So that you'll have the opportunity to read from something and talking about the award for what particular category it might be.
Thank you. And also, we're still searching for a historian on this board. So I believe that Miss Member Guida has submitted someone's name, and the rest of us can also do the same.
And Chair Rios, there has been some interest from another member of the public as well.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else, board members? If not, our next meeting is May the 9th. That one, as Heather indicated, is dedicated to the buildings, state buildings. And I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Each side moves to adjourn the meeting.
We do a second.
Okay, a roll call vote.
Member Berkeley,
Yes.
Member Beachside,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue, Member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Good night. And it's approximately 8:55. Okay.
Thank you.
And Paul, you did a very nice job. You didn't appear nervous at all.